February 3rd, Tuesday, February 3rd at 1:30 p.m. We are convened in the council conference room, city conference room. This meeting is being recorded and will also be posted on the Provo City website. We'll begin with the roll call. Mayor Curtis, could you start that?
Thank you. John Curtis.
Kate Van Buren.
Al Miller.
Jim Santiago.
Dave Sewell. Gary Winterton.
Gary Garrett.
Matt Taylor.
Brian Jones.
Louise Jurgensen.
Thank you. Ask Price to give our opening prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for this day and grateful for the opportunity which we have to meet together in this work session to discuss matters pertaining to the city. We're grateful for our city leaders and for the efforts and times which they put forth into making decisions and forming opinions and helping to establish the direction of the city. We ask that Thou will bless, that Thy Spirit will be with us this day and help us in making decisions. We're grateful for the many blessings which we enjoy and grateful for the many freedoms which we enjoy and for the opportunity which we have to participate in city government. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Bryce. As a side note, we'll be circulating through this meeting a couple of cards. We'd like to invite you to sign. One is for Callie Hales that will present to her this evening along with the tribute. And the other is for Wayne Parker. You may or may not have heard his father's funeral was today. In fact, he's excused from today. He passed away
Just about last week, yeah.
So we'll circulate those. The first two items on our agenda are scheduled to take longer than was programmed. There was a little bit of confusion as to the start time of this meeting. So I'm actually going to entertain a motion to move, I move these both at the same time, to continue these two items, 1 and 2, the training relative to the emergency operations plan, council emergency operations handbook, and clarification in the emergency operations plan as to the role of the council and clarify succession authority in case of the mayor's incapacitation, which is unexpected.
Is there a better way to word that?
Yeah. Better in than D, though, right?
Yes.
So is there a motion?
Motion signed.
Okay, thank you. In a second. Kim? Great. Those in favor? Okay, so that's unanimous from our council to continue those two items to the next work session. This meeting's going very quickly. Item 3, which is the city code evaluation amendments, a discussion relative to the relative merits of amending Provo City Code, regulating residential facilities for persons with a disability and residential facilities for elderly persons. This will be presented by Matt Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Now we're actually going to invite Mr. Dan Quick to provide the presentation. This is a follow-up to an earlier code cleanup that was initiated by Camille Williams in the legal department, and she forwarded on these comments. However, I've had Dan working on it. He did a little bit of research and is prepared to make a presentation. That Camille is here as the legal representative behind this work. So I'll turn the time to them.
Thank you. And so again, Camille Williams is here if you have any questions of more legal nature. But so the question revolves around residential facilities in Provo City's code. Yeah, okay, there we go. So as Matt mentioned, this issue arose last year. The city council, or the legal department, noticed that there were some discrepancies between what the city code contained regarding assisted living facilities and what the current state code had been changed to. regarding fair housing and these other acts here at the bottom, because so these acts they do not allow cities to discriminate on basis of gender, familial status, sex, national origin, etc. And so back in 2014, in the beginning of the year, the city code was changed to allow assisted living facilities to be placed in any residential zone, whereas they'd only been allowed in low-density residential previously. And so the legal department noticed that we were perhaps looking at this through a very narrow scope, and that we needed to consider residential facilities for persons with a disability under those same laws. And so looking at the code, we currently have a citation or a statute that places a minimum distance requirement that says that residential facilities for persons with disabilities have to be a certain distance away from others of the same group homes. And so the issue is that is potentially in contrast with the Fair Housing Act, which does not allow us to discriminate on the basis of disability. The second issue is regarding residential facilities for elderly persons. The state recently removed any reference to this type of use from the state code, and the legal department is wondering whether we should follow the state's lead, or whether the city has use for that permitted use. And so looking into it further, the Department of Justice released a statement regarding these minimum distance requirements, and they are of the opinion, and as are most courts, that density restrictions are generally inconsistent with the Fair Housing Act. And so in that case, the simple recommendation is to remove that part of the code, and that is contained in the amendment that is in the notes before you. And then in regards to the facilities for elderly persons, the question is whether the city thinks that is a use that should be continued. And so just a couple of notes about that. The use basically just allows up to 8 elderly persons to live together in a facility. This use has to abide by all other zoning requirements, so they have to have the same setbacks, have to have the same parking requirements, and whatnot. But this use is not found in any state law, and we're not really sure if it's actually even being used in the city. And so for this item, we would suggest that the council refer this to the Planning Commission for review of whether this use should still be contained in the city code, whether it's something that we still want to allow people to do, whether people are even using it, and what other issues might be related there too. Yeah.
I just want to emphasize, I think, one of the points. It's my belief that these two provisions were adopted in our code because the state required them, and we wanted to have matching provisions in our local ordinance. That's sort of the first root question is, if we only put them in to begin with because the state made us, or at least we want them to be consistent with the state statute on a local basis, is there really a need to have them at all? I suppose the follow-up question I just iterate is, from a policy perspective, is there value in keeping them even if the state no longer requires such legislation?
All right, thank you for stating that so eloquently. And so, as I mentioned, the recommendation is that the council would refer this to the Planning Commission for consideration of whether this is a use that we would like to continue to have. And we would refer the entire amendment to them so they can consider that, and then pending their recommendation, we would consider the amendment at that point for approval. And for the removal of the minimum distance requirement, and then follow whatever recommendation the Planning Commission has. So I'm not sure. Are there any questions regarding that?
Now, just to clarify, I think
Mhm.
we're suggesting that the minimum distance requirement is recommended to be removed regardless of these other factors because of the Department of Justice opinion.
Right.
Brian, any legal implications that you have considered with this?
With removal or
Well,
deleting or just
The language.
Well, I think Dan has summarized the analysis of what the potential concerns are very well. So I guess the only issue for the council to really kind of consider is whether there is some compelling policy reason for trying to fight to keep those requirements there. Then we'd have to do some initial analysis to see if we think that's a fight we can win. Similar to the changes that we made a couple of years ago, the likelihood seems small, but we can certainly do that research if there's a compelling policy reason why we want to try to fight to keep those requirements.
Which could be another matter of consideration for the Planning Commission if you wanted to ask the Planning Commission, do you have any sense of why there is a compelling policy reason to keep the distance requirement?
Right.
And I assume the Planning Commission was involved in the earlier decision.
So these,
Yes.
as Matt mentioned, I assume. these
Well,
were
there's
passed-
two parts. I think you're referring to the earlier decision of we took out assisted living facilities last year.
Adding these elements to the code.
They would have been involved, but none of the players are the same.
There's no legislative history regarding
But what
that.
I'm saying is that it would be appropriate, given their prior involvement with the issue, to return it to them in just the way you described. But it may be useful to them to have some history of the actual exercise of the option, and particularly in light of whether there is there will be some greater prospect of the exercise of this option if the distance requirement is eliminated. In other words, is this type of housing for elderly persons something the Planning Commission would like to see encouraged in Provo? It would appear to be nothing more than simply converting an existing dwelling into a place where 8 independent people can live in a 24-hour period. And that represents an opportunity for housing that, at least in terms of national trends, would probably increase, maybe even dramatically, in the next 20 or 30 years. So the question of the Planning Commission is, on the basis of the record of the incidents in the past, is there sufficient reason to think that this might become an important source of housing were the distance requirement?
Agreed. And that's something that the Planning Commission will be able to review. And one other point I forgot to mention is that one thing that will need to be changed as well in the definition of elderly persons is that we'll need to remove, there's a part that says capable of living independently within the definition of elderly persons, residential facilities for elderly persons. And Camille brought up that could be construed as a way of also discriminating on the basis of disability based on someone's capabilities of living independently. So additionally, that would have to be removed from the definition section. But again, all of these things, I think the Planning Commission would have a good view of and be able to view national trends and whether that's something that they want the city to do. Camille, did you have?
That was my point, is that and the Department of Justice would look at what they would consider to be proxy phrasing or words for disability, and something like capable of living independently might raise a red flag So we ought to at least consider whether there is a reason for doing so. You can legislate in a beneficial manner toward persons with a disability, but you would have to have a finding that the legislation was actually beneficial and not motivated by some other intent.
Have you provided an amendment that scrubs this code clean of proxies?
Yes, you tried to do that. I believe you have that.
That is, it's in an appendix to the memo. I don't know if you have that available to you, but there is. Matt, are those memos? Is the CIRE document? Is that included in? Sure. It's in the CIRE document for this.
This is the document you prepared?
Correct.
Yeah, it should have been uploaded to your material.
And that's what would go to the planning commission.
So let me understand exactly what we're doing here. We talked, I know at some point in some certain parts of town, disabilities of elderly and disability would be considered the same, right?
No.
Well, so the issue is this, right? That the Disabilities Act talks about people that are unable to function in certain capacities of daily living, right? And so the question, the issue arises in that, depending on how you define elderly persons, or depending on the ways in which you try to limit residential facilities for elderly persons, you might be implicating the Disabilities Act, because elderly persons are likely to often qualify as disabled. So I think that's Ms. Williams' point, is if you're using restrictions on elderly residential facilities as a proxy for talking about people that can't care for themselves, or you're preferring those kind of facilities because they can care for themselves in preference over facilities for people that can't care for themselves, then you're implicating the Disabilities Act. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
I went on
working
too
on
long.
it still.
So, let me put it this way. I think one of the issues is, I said before, because I was trying to give not a flat out, you have to do this answer, because there's policy considerations for you to consider. I think the issue that's been raised here is rules in the code that might affect people that have disabilities need to be in there for policy reasons that are separate from the fact that those people happen to have disabilities. So, for instance, you've got this distance requirement for the facilities. If you go back to the Planning Commission says, we think that's really important, and plus we want to add that distance requirement to a bunch of other categories of facilities, because we think that that distance is necessary to maintain sufficient parking and traffic safety between facilities where multiple people live. Okay, fine. If they come back and say the compelling reason for doing this is because we don't want people that need caregivers to take care of them in close proximity to each other, because it affects the property values of the other people living in the neighborhood, then you're going to be in trouble.
And that's one of the concerns that we did have at one point with regards to people considered by disabilities a rehab house. How does that affect what we're doing here? If somebody wanted to put a rehab in the middle of a residential neighborhood?
Well, we're not changing the rules. The proposal here doesn't change any of the rules about whether they could do that or not, except insofar as there's already one within 1,320 or 1,380, however many feet it was, of that place, right? I mean, we're not changing. Either they're already allowed to under the code, or they're already not allowed to under the code. The only thing that's being proposed to be changed here is whether you can have two of them within a certain distance of each other.
So that's
If
just
they're
the
otherwise
1320 feet is all they're doing there. You're just saying they could be two side by side by taking that out.
Right.
But we're not changing the words of what disability actually means then.
No.
At this point.
No.
I don't think you have the ability to do so.
Okay.
Mr. Garrett, would you look at Ms. Williams to have a comment?
It is the case that if persons with a disability pose a danger to the other residents of a facility in which they live, or to the neighborhood at large, or public safety problems, then those persons can be excluded under the Fair Housing Act. So if the concern is for public safety, there are provisions to address that already in the law.
Dave, did you have?
I just had a question. There's another distance requirement in here that wasn't recommended for renewal. I was just wondering what was different about that one.
Is that within the elder, facilities for elderly? So age isn't, under the Fair Housing Act, age technically isn't one of the protected classes. So it's my understanding that that is not one that we are legally obligated to protect. And I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, so essentially, for purposes of the Housing Act, we don't yet, and it may come, right, but we don't yet have case law saying you're violating the Fair Housing Act by discriminating against the elderly, unless you're discriminated against the elderly as a proxy for discriminating against the disabled, because so many of the elderly are discriminated against or disabled. Does that make sense?
Any other questions or comments, or is there a motion on this item?
Question. Can you go back to the screen where you talk about the elderly, the actual code? Yeah. So it talks about it must be occupied on a 24-hour basis by 8 or fewer elderly. So that just is what how we define a care center, an elderly care center.
This is not a care center. This is a
Or a care
this is
home, or
this is
whatever.
more of a house with an exception to our other occupancy rules.
Because they can
I know it
have
says
up to 8.
facility, but the term facility is sort of misleading.
Okay.
This use is allowed in basically all of our residential areas. It's actually even allowed in our general commercial area, which is a topic for perhaps another discussion. But it basically is a residential facility, a residential home being used for this sort of facility.
Right. And so what you're saying is we could scrap the whole thing and not have it at all in our code, or we could just scrap the part that says live independently, because that's discriminatory. And if they come back with some valid reason why we should keep it in the code, then we should at least scrap the part that says live independently.
Right, that's the recommendation that's been made. And if you scrap it entirely, then essentially what happens is all of the standard zoning laws are going to apply in every zone. And then if somebody wants to come and have one of these facilities, and there's not a use provided for it in the code, then they have to come ask for a reasonable accommodation. And then we would follow our standard city procedures for looking at that reasonable accommodation and granting it or denying it.
Okay, so what we're deciding is, do we want to have planning look at it, or do we want to just scrap the live independently part and keep it as it is?
Right.
And legally, that would be fine. If we just remove that one part, it would be fine, and it would serve as it has served in the past without discriminating.
Well, and I think that's part of the question. Part of the reason why the recommendation is to send it to the Planning Commission instead of doing anything right now is, has it served anything in the past? We're not sure if it's, as I understand, we're not even sure if it's ever even been used. So
With going to Planning Commission, the planning staff would research that more.
So we're not sure if it's served that purpose in the past or not, or whether we put it in there because state code adopted a bunch of these definitions, so we copied it, and now they've deleted them all, so maybe we ought to too, because we haven't, it's just extraneous.
And then the part with disabilities is just removing the discriminatory part.
Right.
So the fact that they're saying they can't live in close proximity, if we take out that part, then it's not discriminatory.
Right. Because we already made changes last year to remove the other parts of the discernment. We just didn't catch the customers there.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve all 3 recommendations,
We're asking for a motion to move it forward with the Planning Commission.
including the part that we made forward to the Planning Commission. Sorry,
So can you put it back on that screen that we're,
Which
well, I
one?
guess it's right here too.
Oh.
What we're approving. What we're-
So we have a motion by Mr. Sewell, with a second by Mr. Miller. Any other questions or discussion?
So the motion, just to restate, so the motion is to send these 3 recommendations to the Planning Commission for their consideration with the request that they come back to the council with a recommendation of whether or not to adopt these recommendations.
Well, if I can clarify, I was thinking that we would just actually move ahead with the first and the third one recommendations, because it doesn't recommend that we send those to the Planning Commission. And then on the second one, as it states, to forward that to the Planning Commission.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought the recommendation was to send them all to the Planning Commission. Maybe I.
The idea was that Planning Commission would review all of it, and then we would approve it all at once at that point.
Then I have a question. Is there a problem leaving discriminatory language in there for any amount of time? I mean, it doesn't seem like it would hurt to strike that and then have them work on what we need and more information on.
The city code currently does have a catch-all provision, which indicates that a reasonable accommodation from any of these provisions can be sought. And so I think in practice right now, I'm not aware of any problem. Obviously, the best way to handle what appears to be a facial discrimination is to remove it. But certainly, you're on good, solid ground in asking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission following your procedures, assuming that's the general procedure.
I kind of feel like Dave said initially that it would be good to follow the recommendation as is and strike 1 and 3 or strike the language that's discriminatory, and then have Planning Commission return with information on how many residential facilities we have with the elderly. I mean, that would be my preference, but
I think that's probably fine. I think the reason why, the reason why I had it in my mind that it was going the other way is because that's generally how the Planning Commissions function, right? So it's a little bit odd for this to come straight to you, because what normally happens is Planning Commission hears things either because a citizen has asked for it and so then they hear it, or because planning staff has made a recommendation to the Planning Commission. There is a provision in the code that also says that the council can request recommendations from the Planning Commission. And so it's typically, I think, been our practice in the past that even if we came up with the idea to say, Planning Commission, your role is to weigh in on all Title 14 and 15 changes, so we're going to send you any proposed Title 14 and 15 changes for your recommendation. Do you have other input in that?
Short of actually pulling up the exact code, I believe our statute, Oxford State statute, does require Planning Commission input on any amendments 14, 15. So there may be a way not to do that, and it'd be fine. But I think just to be following normal practices.
and that's fine. I just thought if we can make it more simple.
If I may, one thing just mentioned, we didn't notice the references off on the section. And so if you just refer to that area without the specific section, we can make sure that it's the right one.
Okay, thank you.
So that's good.
Thank you, Brian. So we have a motion and a second on the
So
table.
is the motion the same then?
Unless there's a substitute motion.
I'm not making
So the motion is the same.
Okay, thank you.
And in the motion, Mr. Sewell, is to forward the entire recommendation to the Planning Commission. Right?
Yes. Those in favor of this motion? Thank you. That
And
vote
who
is
was the
unanimous.
second?
The second was Mr. Miller.
Mr.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Williams, also. The next item for our discussion will be presented by Policy Analyst Ryan Harvey, a discussion on the Provo City Youth Government. Ryan?
Thank you, Chair Garrett, members of council, mayor. This actually comes out of a discussion that we had with a few council members. Regards to the council staff over the years has received a few phone calls regarding youth government, youth city council, if we would do it or if we were ever going to pick it up again. So we actually the city code, we have a chapter 2.37, section 020, the purpose of the youth city government. So the purpose of the Provo Youth City Council is to provide training and opportunity for local youth to interact with the municipal council and other important organizations, to allow for an opportunity for input from local youth to local government to deal with local issues impacting Provo's youth. The association, there's actually a state association called the Association of Youth Councils. And their purpose, they say, to provide opportunities for youth to develop mature citizenship, leadership, a sense of personal achievement, and an understanding of government. So that's just a little overview of what the purpose of youth government is. If you had a chance to read the memo that was included in your packets, over the last 10 years, this is what we have spent. These are the actuals of what we have spent on the Youth City Council, going all the way back to 2004. After 2010, that is when the city did major budget cuts. And in an effort, our office to do our part, we cut this program from the budget. You can see how much it saved, right? Yeah. It was budgeted.
More symbolic then.
Yeah, it was more symbolic, and it was budgeted at about $1,200 per year.
Y'all were
So
just
each of those
bleeding over
years,
there.
it was budgeted. What was that?
So y'all were just bleeding over there.
Yes.
Anecdotally, I think leadership at the time was trying to counter the mayor's efforts with the Miss America, or Miss Provo.
Miss America.
Miss Provo pageant.
Is that a proposal from the council to take it over?
I'm not sure this council knows of that history.
So
Are the bigger money years, is that because they went to the conference?
yes, and I'm going to get to that. So in 06, fiscal year 06, fiscal year 2010, they went to the day at the legislature. So
Or is that the conference?
the day of the legislature is what many of you attended just this last week, and that's currently it's $55 per student attending. I don't know what it was back in those years, but we do have rolls from back in those years, and there was about 20 youth that were a part of youth government in those years. So, and then they also did some service projects. They did Sub for Santa and some other things that took up some of those costs. And so those were just those 2 years. And then the other years, it kind of was on and off. They did a few things, but it wasn't really consistent outside of those 2 years. So I had a good conversation, a lengthy conversation with Julie Davis. She's the Association of Youth Council president, and I talked with her about how the ideal program would be run, what are the benefits and everything. She actually was over the Clinton Youth City Council for 10 to 15 years as a volunteer, pure volunteer. So she hasn't ever gotten paid for anything. And she's still a volunteer as the president of this association. And so I'm just going to recap some of her some of the things that she told me, and then we'll look at a sample what a budget would look like if we were to do this. So one of the things she said is there's about 70 cities throughout the state that have a youth city council or a youth government, and they all look very different. And there's actually not. She didn't. I asked her, what would you recommend? She didn't really say what she would recommend in the different areas. She just wants us to have a youth government. So there's anywhere from 5 members to South Jordan, I think she said, have 40 members. Anywhere from 5 youth to 40 youth. Anywhere from, as far as funding goes, it's as little as $500 or less, all the way up to $5,000. In fact, her city, Clinton, she doesn't run the government anymore, but her last year there, their budget was $5,500. So the budget can range quite widely. And then the staffing needs, I asked her about, because it was my impression, and I actually for 1 year ran a youth city council in South Ogden City when I worked there as an intern, and it was my impression that most of the coordinators were actually staff, but she said that of the 70 cities, about 75% of the cities, their coordinator is actually volunteer, not a paid staff member. Only 25% currently are paid staff members, and that can be part-time, a part-time person that they bring in for that purpose, but mostly it's just a staff member that's already there that absorbs that duty into their other duties that they're currently doing. And I asked her, which programs are run better, the ones by the volunteers or the ones by the staff members? And she said that it varies. She said there's good ones run by staff members, poor ones by staff members, and same with the volunteers. So if we go to this, so this is what a sample budget would look like. And I said 7 participants because as you read through the purpose and you think about it, we have 7 council members. If we were going to do a youth city council, I would think that we would want 7 members. But of course, we can do more than that, maybe as it grows in popularity. But if a sample budget, so this Utah State University Leadership Conference, it's kind of the big event for these youth city councils. They get together up at Utah State. It actually costs $155 per person. As I was talking with Julie, the way that she does it in Clinton, and she actually recommended this, was you have the students pay $50 up front before the year even begins, or as the conference is approaching, as kind of a down payment, non-refundable. And then they also have to attend 80% of the meetings in order for the city to pay the rest. So it has them put some skin in the game, and the city isn't bearing the full cost. So that for 7 participants, $735. Day at the legislature is $55, and so that's $385. And then these are just numbers that, supplies. There wouldn't really be very many supplies, so budget $100 or even less. Service projects, depending on the type of service projects that the students do. Like for example, they did Sub for Santa in 2006. As I was looking through some of the documents, and if you sponsor, one person in Sub for Santa, it could be $100 to $150. So that can vary as well. A staff member or volunteer coordinator, if you absorbed it into a city staff member, or if you had a volunteer coordinator, it wouldn't be too much. And so the total budget, $1,320. And that could increase over time if we felt that the program was very beneficial. Or if we didn't think it was necessary to send them to the leadership conference, it could obviously decrease as well. And so I'll open it up to questions. The policy considerations that I put in the memo, is it the responsibility of the city to provide an environment to educate youth about the function of government? And even if it's not a responsibility, is it something that the council's interested in? And if so, to what level would we want to fund it? And, the question is, would the coordinator be a paid staff member or a community volunteer? So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer questions. I also will note that when I talked with Julie, she said that if you did have more questions and wanted her to come down, she'd be willing to come down and spend as much time as you want.
She in Salt Lake City or in?
She's in Clinton, actually. Yeah.
Matt, additional?
I just want to say thank you to Ryan for doing the research and looking into fielding these calls. I just wanted to make it clear that we're responding to interest from council members. We are not necessarily asking to take this on or suggesting that we do this, but I think we are in a position to do it if you should want us to.
Mr. Sewell?
Did you happen to mention if any of those programs were, the budgets were supplemented from donations from businesses?
She did say that some city, she said that her city, when she worked in Clinton, in the beginning when they only got $500, because they started out at $500 her first year, that they did do some projects to get some, some fundraisers. So I'm not sure other programs, but probably.
So, sorry, if you already mentioned, so I was filling out the card while you were speaking. I have two questions. One is, how many youth have approached the city for something like this? And how would we get the word out to actually get people to, to be involved? And then the other is on those down years where there was zero money spent, were those years where they didn't do anything, or those years where they just used volunteers and donations and all those kinds of things to just make it happen without city resources?
Yeah, so the second question, yeah, they didn't do much. We have kind of spotty records from those years, but you could see a meeting every once in a while, but there really wasn't much going on those years. As far as how many, I know you've received some phone calls. I'm not sure the exact number.
We probably get 1 or 2 calls from kids, students, and then we get a few calls from teachers.
And
a few calls a month, a week, a year.
And the way that we got the word out when I was in South Ogden, before I got there, they didn't have a program. And then when I got there, what we did is we just went around to the high school, and then the junior highs, because it was 9th grade through 12th grade. And we advertised it that way. We just went to some of the government classes there and advertised it and had a great turnout. We actually ended up getting, in South Ogden when we did it, we ended up getting 15 to 20 applications, and we decided to just take all of them. So we didn't.
We may be getting approximately that number as well that don't know to call the council office. It wouldn't be more than that, but it might be about that much.
I would be interested in hearing from council members who are supportive of this concept, how you would see this body functioning in our city, what kinds of issues you'd see them taking under consideration. One that came to mind when you mentioned that, Ryan, of course, was the recent Fight Club's resolution that we passed. Issues that have impact on the youth and interest. What other issues?
I believe this originally came from the benchmarking analysis with respect to a clearinghouse for volunteer opportunities in the city, and part of what Bryce put together was a recital of existing as well as past volunteer groups, and this was one of them. I was surprised to see it because I was unaware of any history of such, but immediately sensed that there would be merit, not necessarily in this kind of structure. This seems, frankly, a bit too formal for my taste. But I think there would be merit to a small advisory group drawn from representatives of the 2 universities as well as the 2 high schools in the city, perhaps with the principals at the high school recommending a pair of 1 or 2 students who might be involved, and the team of students or the student government at the university doing the same, so that we had a manageable group, perhaps half a dozen to as many as 10. And this would be an informal, perhaps meeting twice a year initially, and then from there determine whether it might become more formal or it might be more frequently. Simply to talk about issues of concern to them and of concern to the council, to see what insights they may have, recommendations, what sense they have of the issues and directions in which the council might proceed. Purely advisory, not in any way establishing policies, not a legislative body in any sense, but it is just an informal give and take, and in the process they may gain a closer sense of what municipal government is, especially on the legislative side. In fact, at no cost, I would be happy to volunteer to be an interlocutor with such a group, just to sort of test the waters, test the proof of concept, see what good might come of it.
As you mentioned, possibly a clearinghouse for service opportunities as well. Groups often seeking those opportunities. So maybe not so formal, but the structure. Other thoughts?
I like the idea of giving youth the opportunity to experience government work, to kind of see what we do and understand what the city does and how we do it, and give them an opportunity to interface with a great volunteer mentor. I think that's a great idea, and I think since they've done it in the past on a volunteer basis without allocating money, maybe that's a good start to try to.
It's been a staff function.
It's been a staff function? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, I think that's maybe a good segue, but just to sort of see if it's something that there's an interest, and if we do get the word out, and we find that there's great interest, and that they really do want to go to the conferences, they want to go to the day with the legislators, and this is something they're really excited about, and not that we're creating a program, but that people really want to engage in, then we put money behind it, as we see the need or the interest.
Could blend well with high school courses in public policy.
Student government,
Yeah. Other thoughts? Mr. Stewart?
It seems like we're talking about two different things here. One is the more formal city council, youth city council. I was just noticing at the day of the legislature, there were a lot of young people that seemed really excited about what they were doing there and interested. So I do see merit in this program, although I don't understand a lot about it yet. But I also see merit in the more informal advisory council approach. So I'd be supportive of either or both.
I did fail to mention maybe a little bit more about the structure and how it kind of works. At least how it ran when it was running, and you can obviously have more or less meetings, but they would meet every other week as a mock, kind of like a mock city council, and they'd have a council chair and someone leading the meeting, and then they'd have a meeting kind of like you do as city council members. Some programs are more service oriented. The Julie that I talked with said that at their peak in Clinton they did 25 service projects a year. Others are, when I was in South Ogden, we were more on the legislative side, trying to think of things that would be beneficial for the actual council members, and bringing that to them. We probably did one, maybe two service projects, but it was more focused on creating legislation that might be beneficial to the city. So, it can take either of those forms.
As Brian and I talked about this, our impression was the type of person that you have running this impacts the quality and nature of the program. And I'm all for volunteers, and if the council is more comfortable with not allocating staff resources, that's fine. I do think it's important to consider some of the trade-offs. That's one reason I think many of these programs are volunteer focused, because the volunteer wasn't necessarily steeped in the inner workings of government themselves. And so it turned into more of a volunteer to go out and serve projects versus let's really get the youth in and teach them about government, how that works, and get them in a quasi-mock legislative policy-making process. And so I think it's important just to realize that if you have a volunteer that's very adept at those things and experienced those things, that would be ideal. Otherwise, if the goal is to teach them local government, then I would think it would need to be a volunteer that's very adept at those things, or a staff member. If it's just a general volunteer, they may not be able to produce the right experience.
I just think that I would like to gauge the interest, just to see where we're at. Put out some feeders with the university, if you want to go up that high with the youth, the Timpview High School, have a meeting and see what happens. See what the interest is. I like your idea, Mr. Miller. I don't want to force, our kids are so busy a lot of times. Let's not force, give them opportunities, but not force things on them.
I think the natural reaction is, because we do have a teacher or two call us so often wondering about the programs, there's teachers that want this opportunity.
And I think teachers need to be involved, otherwise the kids won't follow through.
Teachers at high schools?
Yes.
Are calling, yes.
Well, Dixon Middle School, we
Yeah,
have one
middle school.
teacher who's very interested in one at the high school.
Mr. Van Buren.
And that probably brings me to my question. I was in high school a long time ago. But at that point in time, there was debate and legislative forum classes where you had competition all year long, state tournament that had exposure to the legislative process, how to do this. So I don't know if those are still offered in high school curriculum now. If they are, then I think those who are interested have an opportunity there. So it's not like this is the only opportunity.
I will make a motion that we request that our staff institute a Provo Youth Advisory Council, accepting Mr. Miller's offer to serve as an advisor to that group and explore possible future of that organization. One of the idea of starting an advisory council.
Would part of your motion include a recommendation to increase our budget this year? This is where you like to have some exploratory work first and then have that come back to our recommendation.
Yeah. B.
B. Option B.
Second. Mr. Jewell, second. Those in favor? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for your help with that. Next, we turn to a discussion and presentation of CDBG non-social services, Social Service Committee funding recommendations. And we'll turn to Mr. Robert Horton, Redevelopment Agency, for this presentation. Robert, welcome.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Great.
I'm back again.
Has it been a year already?
It's been a year. Yes, it has. We just finished the one process and we're starting another. I hope you don't mind. With age, I've found that I need to take more notes, and with age, the notes get bigger, size 24 font. So I hope I can say everything that needs to be said. I'm assuming most of the responsibility today with work commitments. Many of them could not be here to the work session, but I have been assured we'll have a number of our members at the February 17th council meeting. So if you have specific questions, they will be there to answer them. I know our chair for the Social Service Committee, Jim Kenyon, works up at the UVU. We could not be here. So I did want to make sure of that. I do want to give the names and thanks to those who have served on the Social Service Committee. As I said, fighting a cold. Jim Peterson was our chair from North Park. Martha Windsor, who was here, who's from Franklin neighborhood. Mike, and I never have learned how to say Mike's name. So
No.
Thank you,
It
Michael.
starts with B, and I understand.
And Michael's here, and he played a significant role. I appreciated it. Leo Lyons represented Joaquin Tambruff with Spring Creek. Melissa Kendall was from Wasatch. Michael Mers was from Franklin South. And then with this year, we did something a little different. We brought finance into the picture so they could see how we do things and how we go through the process. And Dan Follett served on the Social Service Committee. He lives in Grandview. He is one of the budget finance directors. So it was good to have him and his perspective on there. Now for the non-social service committee, it's a smaller committee. We had Lee Houghton from YESCO was the chair. Lila Dutton from Community Action was the vice chair. And she's with Community Action. Brad Bishop of the Rural Housing Corporation. Celeste Kennard, Joaquin and Mrs. Kennard is here today. And Denise Roy served as our budget department, served on the committee also. All the committees have asked me through emails to express to the council and the mayor their appreciation for allowing them this opportunity to serve. It wasn't a lot of work, but they appreciated it. They did review all the requests. They did have discussions, and in some cases we had lively discussions, but that was good. This year the committee faced two significant problems. One is we don't know our final budget amount. We have an estimate we're working with. The budget was approved by Congress, but has not filtered through the bureaucracy down to us from HUD to what to expect. So we're using an estimated amount of $1,150,000. The second one is there's always more requests, more applications than there is money. We don't mean to say that there's bad projects or bad organizations. It's just there's not enough money to go around. No matter how we look at it, the catchphrase soon became, okay, let's consider what we can do to reach the furthest and impact the most people possible. The committee operated it on the following tenets. First, we made sure the applicants that we were considering met our national objective for HUD. Second, you just approved in the end of September, beginning of October, new locally targeted objectives for us. We came to you for that approval. We made sure they met at least 2, 3 of those bullet points, so that the more they met, the more we considered the higher priority. And then we looked at Vision 2030 to see how many of those priority items. So we tried to make sure that we had something solid to measure each one on as we went through the process. From the social service side, we also weighed things like how many families, individuals they served, what segment did they serve of the population, where was the program delivered, and was there any duplication of services, meaning if we fund one, is someone else doing the exact same thing, do we want to fund both? Those are some of the higher priority items we looked at. We tried to focus away from what might be called administration or admin money. We looked at more money that delivered specific things, whether it was therapy directly to a recipient. If it was admin in nature, we wanted to see that they were administering a large body of volunteers for their organization. We did that with Mountain Lions Community Hospital and 2 or 3 others that they have a body of volunteers that they manage. And something like that the committee was comfortable with. They tried to prioritize as I say, direct funding to victims where they could. Now, in non-social service, the priority was twofold. Could the project be a one-time funding only and be completed within a year? And 2, if it's on an ongoing project, can they complete it? Those received higher priority in our funding discussions. As I say, committee members invested 2 to 3 hours a week in our meetings for about 6 or 7 weeks. Then they spent the time reading the applications, reviewing them, many called, some even went by to visit with the applicants. So it's a very informative. It's not haphazard. It's very specific in how they looked at this criteria. It was a very measured approach. They took their fiduciary responsibility quite important. I'm proud to say that CDBG is probably the most looked at, examined, and scrutinized parts of your budget, the city budget you have in the city. For the small amount of dollars we have, there spends a lot of time and energy on it. I applaud and appreciate each of the committee members who served. Again, I want to say our recommendations were based on just estimates at this point in time. Each committee did put as part of their funding recommendation that if the grant goes up or down, the recommendations be administered or directed the same way. If it goes up, same percentage up. If it goes down, same percentage down. So it goes across the board. If you would like, you have in your files, not quite as big as mine, but you have a funding recommendation. I can go over that. I'm sorry that is sideways.
Sideways.
I think. There you go. It's not as big as mine, as I said, but it'll work. This is what we gave the non-social service committee, was this funding sheet. They did come back as you directed this year and look at 2 different funding recommendations, 12.5% and 15% for social services. So that left different amounts of money for the social, the other organizations. Top left-hand part of that screen, at the top, towards the top, if you wouldn't mind, we have some money that wasn't used last year that we would keep going. That we are reprogramming these things right up in here. This is all funds that weren't used last year. We didn't need in our administrative side, so we're saying put it back in the pot of money, reprogram it. We were effective in how we ran our program, so we have money left over. We did collect two amounts of money here, $44,000 and $80,000, one from small business loans that we're going to ask to reprogram to small business, and one from our down payment assistance program. Several people paid off their down payment loans we gave them. It's a 0% loan until they sell the house or move. And several sold their house or moved, and they repaid us off. So that goes back into the pot. We can rotate that around, revolve it around, and use it again as such. So we had $1,351,000 by the time we grabbed everything that we could think of together. And here in this column are some of the activities we have to fund, the revolving loan funds. We asked you to just revolve those monies back in. Admin, unfortunately, we have to have people run the program, our office, so that is money that we do have to have. We do have revolving loan funds here that we have very active, and we need to pay to run those programs. That's called program delivery, not administration. Then the social service side. And these were all the applicants we had, and as you can see, the request was $2,343,000. So they had some whittling to do to see which ones they could or would fund, and they visited with each, had presentations. I know most of them, some of them got called, several of them got visited as they went through the process to ask questions to ensure that they had the right amount of money. Now the columns to the far right are their two recommendations, 12.5% and 15%. Those will be on your sheets. You can look at those and review those. As I said, we do have one new program, egress windows here. This is ingress, egress for basement apartments. They thought we'd try a new program to rehab houses that have basement windows that don't meet current code for egress or ingress from safety issues. So it's kind of a new program that the committee was really excited about running. One time one was Kiwanis Park, and what that is to put some playground equipment in the Kiwanis Park in a specific area that preschool and school younger children can use when school is in session. As it is now, there's equipment, but it's on school district grounds and they're not allowed to go to use it. So the Parks Department came to us with that application as a new one. I can tell you about each, or I don't know if you've had time to look over it, if you have specific questions. I guess I'm looking for directions. Yes, sir.
So I know, Robert, that request from Kiwanis Park and the next one, Exchange Park, are the only two that the group has recommended be fully funded.
Yes. They are one-time, one-year projects. And let me stress on Kiwanis Park, our Parks Department is going to do the labor, and they are donating the ground to which this is an expansion and to house some areas for RA to have their activities in so that it'll get sprinkler system and a fence.
So that's equipment only then?
Yes, it is. We did combine these two here, the bike path and the 400 East curb and gutter. We're going to see how far $150,000 or $176,000. That was probably the toughest one to decide on. Spring Creek is a continuation of a park we've been working on for quite a number of years. All the homes are now purchased. They are all down demolished. Now we're doing lot cleanup, and we're starting design work, and that is moving forward. So that is a continuation. Our emergency repair program is one we ran out of money on in the current fiscal year. And what that is for seniors, citizens that had emergency type repairs, roof leaks, sewer breaks, those type of things where they don't have any ability to pay, we step in with an emergency program and help them out. So,
Robert, did any of those organizations at the top that didn't fully use their grants during last year, did any of them fall down to your list this year?
No, those were all, the up above reprogramming was all on ours administration side. So some of the admin money where we're asking $230,000, what we don't use, we will bring back to you. And that's what we did that year. And some of it was part of these two right here also. So what money we don't need as far as to administer the program or to run the revolving programs, we bring back. We look and say, okay, worst case scenario, this is if everything lines up, this is how much we're going to need. If everything doesn't line up or something stumbles, we aren't able to get it. Now, that's the non-social service side. You have a social piece. Can you pop that slide up real quick?
Mr. Miller has a question.
I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, help me remember, is are the recommendations made by the committee offered blind to other sources of revenue for the projects?
Blind, you mean, do they have other sources of funding?
And if they do, are those other sources of funding made available to the committee to consider as in the context of?
Especially that comes to relate more to our social services, yes, they are able to, excuse me,
Not just, but
tie our money with a grant.
Specifically interested in the non-social services.
Okay, in non-social services, many of those, there are other funding sources tied to it that we're tying with. When you get into the parks department, there is no other money. They just don't have budget items. And sometimes if you get to the street sidewalks, the gutters, the street gutters we were looking at, sometimes they're tying us up with another grant they already have in place.
Right.
So we tie to
My
it.
question is, are the members of the committee provided with that additional information?
That is one of the questions they ask. They want to see the budget, they want to see all forms of the money that is available and where we're going to be tied in. Thank you. So that is a question. Yes, ma'am.
Have council members been involved with this process in the past, and to what level? And should we have a liaison to this process, given?
Historically, well, last 2 years we haven't done it. The council has decided, the RDA executive committee has decided they didn't want to do it. But historically, we've usually had a meeting, our first meeting with both committees is with council members. The council members can give them direction and help them understand, okay, these are what priorities I see. And then we usually have a meeting before we come to you in end of January, before we come here, and we sit down and say, okay, here's our funding recommendation. What questions do you have? How can we help you understand how we came to this? Presently, that is not there. Council members are invited. Council staff is invited to attend. We don't close doors or anything along that lines, but there is no input at this point.
And when you held that public meeting to get people to come out and give input on the CDBG, it seemed like the public was confused. They're like, why are we hearing about this so late? They didn't really understand the focus of the meeting. So were you able to draw people from that meeting to be part of the committee, or did you mostly go with neighborhood chairs? How did you select the people to be on the committee to help put this together?
The Social Service Committee is established in our CON plan, that 5-year plan, as members of certain low mod area census tracts. So automatically those areas are represented. We do open it up to the mayor and the council if they want to add people or add bodies. We just had the neighborhood reps this year, except for the 2 budget officers that we did add. Those are the only people that we had on the this year.
I appreciate having your input. That was helpful. To know that they were engaged and involved in the process.
They really got into it. They were good. Denise was able to bring some things on the non-social service side as a budget officer. She was able to bring the CIP in and goes, okay, here's what they're doing on CIP, here's what they're looking at your money for. And we're able to compare the two. So it was very beneficial. Very beneficial. Dave?
We received an email about a Greenway on 200 East project, and I was wondering if that was a proposal that you looked at for this year. It wasn't clear to me if they were talking about a future request.
It wasn't part of the applications for this year, no, sir. The green line?
Yeah, it was called something. It was called
Linear Park.
the Linear Park on 200.
Oh, was that part of the
Yeah, that's what.
Was that part of the curb gutter sidewalk one, 400 East?
No, it's not the 400 East curb gutter sidewalk. It's the just.
See, this is why I have members there. They help me remember these things.
Sorry, I thought it was engineering that applied, and it was Brad Jorgensen that presented, and I can't find it.
Do you know what the rationale was for not putting that on this list?
It should be on here.
Well,
I remember it being.
I thought it may be part of one of those two applications. I don't honestly where.
We received it.
Oh, there it is. My plan, it says 600 east, that's wrong. It's 200 east, and if you look at
That's
the,
part of the bike path.
yeah, that's why, because it connects both of those two together in one project. It's just a misprint on the 600 east. It should say 200.
Then that'll be part of the bike path, that bike path application. And we told them, okay, you have all these pieces to both these applications, intermingle them where they fit together and go as far as you can go and bid it. So that was the strongest use of it. I didn't remember the name.
So that's in there, it's just a misprint, and we can fix that, fix this.
Mr. Wickerson, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question about the non-social service with the Kiwanis Park. You said the city's gonna put that in, is it for the school? You said, I had a little confusion about that. The school kids will use it, or the teachers oversee that at recess time, or is it for the?
No. Oh, that Kiwanis Park, that is a Parks Department request with the neighborhood. They worked together almost 2 years on that application. It is to put it'll put it into an area of a protected area where parents can bring their kids and the equipment will be kind of fenced off or kind of separated from the school, but it will not be on school grounds.
Not on school grounds, and it will not be overseen by the school.
Right. It is on city property. It will be city maintained. Parks Department will maintain it. That way, the equipment that is there now is on school property. They can't use it during school hours. Thus, they would like something to use outside during school hours that will be under part of the park.
And a fence?
I remember thinking there was a small fence going.
Why is that just keep? If it's, I don't understand because the kids are little and keep the kids in. Okay, I guess.
As I remember it.
Okay.
It's for preschool kids, as I remember.
Okay.
Any other questions on the, this is non-social? We move to the social list? Yeah.
I did have, let me see, I have a question. There was miscellaneous on the social services allocation table. And on one of your tables, and it was miscellaneous.
That was
I wonder
my
what
category.
was miscellaneous. Oh, you just made
It
me.
just meant that there wasn't a category that really fit.
Okay, so that was just a catch-all. Okay. And then,
Okay, that was really through. Okay, thank you.
on the resolution for that part of it, and the resolution part 1, number 3 said consolidate, and then you didn't say consolidation. It was just sort of a housekeeping.
It's called the consolidated plan.
A consolidate.
Did plan.
It, okay, so that was where to cut. Okay.
Anything else on this? I can go over social services.
Could we take a quick look at social services again? Any questions here?
Now, there are two that I will address right off that did not get funded, and I think that should be addressed. I would rather the committee will address it in deeper discussions with you on the 17th. But Big Brothers Big Sisters and Rocky Mountain University professionals, neither were funded this year. Big Brothers Big Sisters is starting a program in Utah County in Provo, but they do not have a presence. Everything they do is by phone. And the committee felt, let's give them 1 more year, get it under their belt, let them come back, and then we'll review the situation at that point in time. That's in a nutshell of why they were not funded. It's not they didn't like the organization, it's just that they're not here, they're not with the presence, working with the students, they're doing it by phone, and they thought it could be better, the money could be better served directly to someone else. Rocky Mountain Professionals, we funded a couple years ago to build out a therapy room down here at the, they are now operating that. They don't have their volunteers in place, don't have the class quite up to where they need to be. we thought we'd give them one more year, let them get their volunteers worked up, class curriculum worked up, and they can come back to us, and we can look at doing something next year as part of the social services. That was the short version of the discussions of why those two did not receive any funding. Mike and Martha, if I missed anything else, you're welcome to jump in.
You did well.
So they did give you both 12.5% and 15% on each. You can see only a few of them were funded full. Only a few were funded almost the full request. Those are their priority items. The ones that are fully funded and the ones that are nearly funded are the higher priority items. The committee felt had the most unity with. So that's why they were funded the way they are. Any other questions I can answer on this one? That
This item is scheduled to be presented on the 17th.
17th of February, you will have a public hearing with public input, and then you will have your discussion.
So unless there are any other questions, I'll look for a motion to move the item to council. She sent this to you too. Mr. Miller, motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Winterton. Thank you. Those in
Now,
favor?
anytime if you have questions between now and then, please email me or call me.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Those in favor? And that vote is unanimous. Thanks again, Robert, and committee members for your help. Thank you so much for your work on that. Very helpful. Look forward to discussing this. This brings us to a presentation by Dan Gonzalez on the proposed home funding recommendations. Dan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Similarly to the CDBG program, but a little easier, not as anyway, a little easier. From HUD, we received both of these grants, CDBG and home. But the home grant is a little different than CDBG. CDBG is exclusively to the city. Home program, the funds come to us as a consortium, of which we are part of. We are the lead entity, and the other two members of the consortium are Orem City and Utah County, which is all entities within Utah County except for two townships. So as a consortium then, we received, we're anticipating to receive about $1 million, just under that, of new entitlement funding. The advisory board that looks at the applications and talks to the agencies in their presentations is made of five committee members. One that represents Provo is Mr. Jonathan Calu. From the city of Orem is Mr. Stephen Downs, and three representatives from Utah County, Jed Mitchell from Spanish Fork, Jill Spencer from Payson, and Mr. Chris Creer from Springfield City. So of the applications that are received after they are reviewed by staff to ensure that they meet the minimum requirements of the program, then the committee gets together, listens to the presentations, and then does a discussion about who to fund and how to fund them. What you see here is, again, this is an estimation. We don't have the final numbers from HUD, but we estimate that we will be receiving about $944,114, and Provo's share of that would be $443,000, and the other two members of the consortium would be a little over $500,000. In the home program, we are allowed to reserve at least a maximum of 10% for administration. Something to consider is, as Mr. Horton was talking about, the administration costs for the CDBG grant. Over the last several years, the monies that we have been receiving for both of these programs have been in the decline. And the 10% that we allocate for the home program does not completely cover all the cost of administration for the program. So that's how you see, what you see on CDBG, that program delivery portion or housing programs. That part of CDBG is actually funding the home program. Okay. We also receive payments from loans that are made from this funding. These are from down payment assistance programs, but also any of the entities that receive funding from like rural housing, Neighborhoods Provo, or Habitat for Humanity. All of these, the housing authorities that are funded for their projects, they're always in a form of a loan. Sometimes it's 0%, sometimes there's a little bit of a percent interest earned on that. But when their projects are completed, or when the people that have received down payment assistance have moved or sold the property, then that money comes back in. And we classify that as program income. And what you see there is $484,000 that were received during the fiscal year 13-14. There's a little less than $500,000 that was reprogrammed. These are from projects that did not go through. I don't remember. There was a tenant-based rental program that had been allocated to Center for Women and Children 2 or 3 years ago. They were not able to capitalize on that, and so some of that money came back. There was a rehabilitation program from NeighborWorks. There was about $40,000 left. The money's getting old, so we need to bring it back in so we can actually use it. So the total that we're looking at is a little over $1.5 million that would be allocated for the following. We're taking 10% for the administration of home. In the home program, there's a category there's a requirement that we must allocate a minimum of 15% to community housing development organizations, nicknamed CHODO organizations. So we have 3 active CHODOs in the consortium, and typically what the committee decides to do is divide that 15% equally among all 3 of them as part of the funding for the project that they are requesting. So NeighborWorks Provo, their request was for $90,000, a little over $90,000, and so they're allocating the total portion and recommending the rest of it. Don't go all the way up. Right there. So they're fully funding their request. For Habitat for Humanity, again, this plus this is their request about $200,000, a little over $200,000, and so that fully funds their request. For rural housing, however, the request was for $750,000. They're giving me a third of that CHODO allocation, and then a portion of that. I am reading that incorrectly. That was $302,794. So only $230 is what they're funding. So that accounts for the full 15% based on the number the entitlement number that we get to receive. These are the other projects or agencies that were applied for funding. The Loan to Own is a down payment assistance program countywide. As of 3 years ago, the RDA is actually administering that program for the consortium. So the request was for $210,000. The Housing Authority of Utah County is developing rental housing in American Fork. The request was for $750,000. And the last one is Golden Spike Treatment Ranch. They do a reentry assistance program to assist inmates that are recently, not inmates, I guess, convicts, released convicts that when they come out are basically homeless. And so they provide housing and they provide a program behind it to help them stay. These are all, they have been convicted of substance abuse. That's what it is. So they come into the program to stay on, in the path.
Which one is that again?
Yes.
Which one is that again?
This one, Golden Spike. So that's what the recommendations are. Most of them are funded completely. There was not enough to completely fund the Housing Authority request, $750, I'm sorry. And they felt that they needed to allocate more funding to the down payment assistance. That's the countywide program, based on the loans that have been made out in the last year, to allow more families to get that funding. Oh, kind of went fast through that. Any questions that you may have? I'm really happy to.
Thank you, Dan. Questions for Dan or clarifications? Kim?
Did you provide the applications, or was that Mr. Horton that provided the applications in our?
We did not, but we can.
Oh, okay. I just had a question about the application for Habitat, but I don't know, maybe I can ask that later too. It was on
For CDBG?
Yeah, maybe that was CDBG then. I'll just ask that in the council meeting.
Okay. Yes.
I have two questions, Dan. The reprogrammed monies, how does the sum compare with past years?
This year is higher than most years. Most years we either have none or $50,000 to $100,000. But these were some projects that are kind of getting old and are now moving on. So
It's very well. How is it we're attributing that sum to Utah County for American Fork?
why to American Fork? They are part of. So.
Utah County is one of the members of.
Yeah, Utah County.
Consortium. Utah
County about 3 years ago decided to. They qualified to become an urban county to receive CDBG funding. When they did that, that automatically changed our home consortium. So they go out to all the cities in the county and ask them if they want to be part of the CDBG urban county. Every city that is part of that interlocal agreement then is eligible to receive funding through the county in their locality, jurisdiction. So American Fork is part of the urban county, and so they're an eligible city to receive funding.
So in some ways, we are obliged then as Provo City to make a contribution to that county fund.
Not all of the funding comes from Provo City.
I understand.
But I think what I would say about that is that this particular program is specifically to build affordable housing, which is in high demand throughout the county. However, most of the affordable housing is located in Provo City. So in order to let the other entities be part of that affordability housing, then the city.
So this is a strategy.
It's a strategy.
Decentering.
Exactly.
Low to mod income housing in the county.
Correct.
I think that's important to note.
Yes. Earlier, Mr. Horton made reference to the consolidated plan. This is the form. This is the document that we use to apply for this funding from HUD, which covers a strategy over 5 years. Currently, we are in the last year of the current comp plan, which was 2005. We're in the process of writing the comp plan for years 2015 through 2019. As part of that process, if Bob mentioned the citizen participation program, anyway, which includes the formation of the committees and what role the council plays in that. We'll be providing a draft of the comp plan to you in the next couple of months. And as you look at that, this would be the time where we could make some changes or revisions to how we've been doing things. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that as an aside.
Can I just?
Yes.
I would like to thank you too for coming to the council and getting our priorities and making that a part of the process. I think it might be helpful to have a liaison from the council to be part of the process as well, but I appreciate you coming and getting our input and incorporating those priorities, and also the Citizen Advisory Committee kudos for that too, because I appreciate having their input and going through and doing the work, and then presenting what you've been able to present today. So.
Thank you.
I agree. This item is also scheduled for our council meeting in 2 weeks, so I'll look for a motion to move it to that meeting for further consideration. Ms. Santiago, thank you. And a second? Second. Mr. Miller, thank you. Those in favor? That vote is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
again.
very much.
Thank you, Robert. We'll move now to a report from Downtown Provo, Inc. Review 2014 and proposed 2015. Mike Bonomo, welcome. Great to have you here.
Nice job on the last name too. That was very. Let's make sure that. Okay. Before I get started, I just wanted to. I have a couple of people here with me. We have Tiffany Fletcher. She is from Aveda, and she is more than happy to answer any questions about how great DPI may or may not be doing. But I'm pretty confident in her answers there. Also, Jared Morgan here for moral support for me, and also checking in to make sure I'm not messing up too bad everything that he started. So hopefully I don't disappoint there. But I'm kind of combining our Q4 review and Q1 for this year. It got a little tight with Christmas at last year, so I'll try and fit both of those in. Am I on a timeline at all? I'm trying to keep this within
10 or 15 minutes, preferably.
Okay, I will hurry.
Thanks, Mike.
So I just wanted to go over the benchmarks that we had and where we were in the process, whether we completed those, and where we got with each benchmark. Documentation of our memberships, we'll go through that here in a minute. Presentations, we're still doing fairly regularly, even though they're maybe combined every now and then. We have the physical enhancement initiatives. This is where we had our lights down in downtown that we installed a few months ago. That has been a really big hit. We rarely do something that doesn't get some complaint from someone other than this project. I think this was the first and only one that I've had. So we've had a really great response with those lights. Marketable downtown master plan is complete. I believe that either was just voted on to accept or is going to be tonight. Thanks, Bryce. No vacancies on Center Street campaign. We had 11 grand openings this year, which we're really excited about. We're also, on the next one, our quarterly surveys. We are in the process of that right now. We actually have BYU that is analyzing our statistics that we gathered from the last quarter. Documentation of 100,000 visitors. We projected about 140,000 is what we had this year, give or take. We didn't count each person individually, but we were able to kind of guess on each event and what it was able to bring in. We'll go over the events list here in just a minute as well. Our website traffic is still lower than it should be. We were wanting to get 3,000 visits per month. We're about 1,800. Our information is outdated right now, and we're doing it right now where we have interns that are coming in the back end and updating and implementing a kind of a rotating calendar that automatically updates where we are, so we can input all of our events throughout the whole year at one time, and it'll automatically bring it up. So we're expecting that to go up once that's complete, probably here within the next couple of weeks. We were to increase our Facebook likes to 4,000, impressions at 50%. We were able to do that. Also, our Instagram, that's where we didn't have any sort of benchmark for social media necessarily, or Instagram. This is where we have a lot of our interaction is on Instagram. We have now 3,600 followers. We have over 3,000 hashtags that say either Eat Downtown or Downtown Provo. And we, in March, we had 290 followers, so we're up quite a bit there. App downloads, we're still updating. And I've probably said that the last couple of times that I've presented on this app. We're trying to work with within the bounds of someone doing this and developing it for us for free. So it's not as easy to push them for results when they're donating the time, but it's only available on the iPhone right now, and so Android users aren't able to, so I know that they're working on getting that. Last we had talked about it, they would be able to have that done sometime at the beginning of 2015, which is now, so we're hoping that will be done here really quick as well. Update the current downtown restaurant brochure. We're doing that. It's been actually, instead of updated, completely just redesigned. While we're at it, we made an entertainment guide. So sort of the same thing, that's just geared towards what you can do downtown as opposed to just where you can eat. So we plan to distribute those where they've been in the past, but we also want to branch outside of Provo with that distribution. Just free pamphlets, really anywhere in Utah County, just to drive the traffic here, not necessarily for the people that are already here, but try to bring people here. So our marketing for downtown, we've done quite a bit of this year. We've just released some KSL ads. We've been doing Sky FM radio ads here for about 4 months. We just got an agreement with, we're working on a monthly installment of a write-up for the Daily Herald on what's going on downtown, new businesses, events that are happening, any cool stories that are happening out of here with businesses, and we'll be doing that every month. And continued efforts in downtown business and property owner advocacy for inquiries on zoning, permitting, ordinance revision. We spent a lot of time on this year actually. Doesn't seem like one of those things that would take up too much of the time, but the food truck ordinance, there was a lot of time spent there calming the blood feud between restaurants and food trucks. So we were able to get an ordinance put together and passed, which was really helped a lot. Just having some sort of guidelines has calmed down the restaurants, and food trucks know where they can and can't go, and the relationship has been really great since that was implemented. We're also involved with all the permitting, just making sure that it's within all the rules with downtown and not conflicting with any other permits. And then the city committees, there is, I think, 9 committees that I sit on with the city, just with various different issues, and whether it's parking or redevelopment planning, whatever it is. So we're really involved and make sure that we get the input there for our businesses. These were the additional ones that we added when I presented for the first time in March. Parking, we were to work with Mayor Curtis to improve parking for events as well as normal business hour traffic, business hour parking. I put Wayfind Project up there. Not really sure where we're getting a lot closer from what I hear. I'm on the parking committee, and we bring it up every time. I'm sure you guys actually probably know a lot better where we are in that process, but as far as our businesses are concerned, when talking about parking issues, when I bring this up, this is one of the few ways I can that they're appeased, and they're really excited for that to happen. I'm not sure where we would need to maybe put some energy on our part, Downtown Provo, to help that move along. So if there's any recommendations there, I'm more than willing to listen to those, and I'd really like to see that happen sometime soon, if possible.
So,
go ahead.
When we said March, we just forgot to say which March.
Right. So 2015, we had just typo on the 2014. So is there any deadlines or?
Right now, I'm hesitant to say, but I've been told it's March. of this year, which is exactly what we said about last year. So I'm a little hesitant to.
I know that there's.
I don't think there's much you can do to speed that up.
Okay, I will keep doing what I'm doing and saying that it's coming soon.
Yes.
Coming soon. Right. Report on sales tax revenues. I'll have it. I have another slide for that. Record of retail and residency figures. Show you another slide of that. We had a benchmark of number of people working downtown. The question mark I put on there is because it is almost impossible for us to track. We found out there's a lot of turnovers, new businesses, hiring, firing. We can have an estimate, but it's never very accurate. So we'd rather moving forward, instead of number of people working in town, number of businesses that are in operation with this year compared to the last year, I think would probably be more beneficial to us to keep track of. And then increasing the overall retail experience. This is something that I feel we really did a good job with this year. Just with the walkability of downtown, the businesses that have come here, and there's a really good sense of community that has been steadily growing and getting a lot stronger. And it's a really fun time to be part of downtown and to be here. And there's a lot of the businesses that are really biting into what we're doing and the vision, and a lot more people willing to write that membership donation, where maybe a little hesitant before. So I think we're doing a pretty good job there. These weren't our benchmarks, but these are some of the additional things that we did just with the nature of who we interact with and what we're trying to do. We were able to secure new partnerships to improve the downtown Provo visibility. By that, we've partnered with advertising companies that will do, they will promote our events or new businesses, things like that for us for free. More of like a trade membership type of deal where we give them a membership and they will do the work for us for free. We prioritize supporting downtown storefronts with introductory and interactive events. A good example of this was our shop and meet that we did on October 3rd, where we had all of our businesses open their doors and just tell everyone who they are. We provided tents for them. They set up tables and just introduced their products. It was really great. Had a lot of great response from that. A direct line to the community with relatable social branding. That's where our Instagram and our Facebook interaction has really gone up. Our Center Street banners that we've recently redone, and commitment to creatively revitalize spaces. We have one relationship in particular that is very excited about Downtown Provo and being a member, and they're willing to put a lot of funds into revitalizing some areas in downtown that may need it, whether it's a painted wall or cleaning up a corner, whatever it is. They're willing to work with those businesses individually and help their spaces become just more appealing. So those are all the words. Sorry, I had so many slides with just words. I know that's boring, but these are some of our pictures of what we were doing this year. We have a really big relationship with Coke. They made Halloween really fun. Got our banners. This is an example of our Instagram and how it's growing with our two hashtags, Downtown Provo and Eat Downtown. This is our improved walkability. These are the lights that we were able to get up this year that we're really happy about and proud about. Really, we've had a couple of businesses that stay open about an hour or two later now, where there's just generally more traffic that's coming because of the lights. It's just a little bit, not that it was ever dangerous before, but now it just feels more comfortable. So that was a big win. And we had 90 plus events this year. Most of those, I think 79 of those were DPI planned or at least we partnered with. The other ones were more sponsorships that we were involved in helping to sponsor and promote. New events for 2015 improved on Play Street Provo. We had about 7,500 people come to our last one. It was our first time doing it. is sort of a mini carnival series where we shut down First South right here and had a bunch of carnival games. Businesses were able to come out and sponsor each carnival game, so it was really good for the exposure there. The rooftop concert series, we had about 30,000 visitors from that. It's technically its own entity, but we are very involved with the operations on how that went and the marketing and making sure that we were there to promote that. And then obviously we had the neon trees come in October, which was honestly a big turning point for downtown. There was, ever since then, that was the day that I would call and beg for money for memberships, to where I'm getting calls and people asking how they can be a part of what we're doing. I don't know if it's that specific, but I'm saying that was the day that it really changed. It really was a really big event for us. A couple pictures here from it. I went over that one too fast. So tons of people. This was the shop and meet right before. A lot of the stores were at capacity. Summer cinema. We had free bike ballet, and this was our small shop Saturday after Black Friday. I have a couple of these. I'll only read this one because it's the shortest, and we just took a few quotes from some of our social media that we felt that you would like to hear. This one is, I've noticed that my wife and I look for opportunities to go downtown now rather than avoid it like we have in years past. There's so many good things that have happened and are on the horizon, and we don't want to miss it. So really good reaction feedback. This is generally how our social media is. We've got a couple of longer ones that say the same thing in more detail. A couple more pictures. This is probably my most favorite picture of what we did this year. I tried walking through the middle of that to get to another store, and it took me about 20 minutes to get through. So there was a lot of people. We don't know exactly. We conservatively guessed about 13,000 people showed up, more or less. It's really kind of hard to gauge that, but streets were packed, businesses were really full, and we had, I think, 3 businesses have their record sales day on October 3rd that day. Just another picture here. These are our event review. So we had 79 that we were either that we planned ourselves or were involved in the planning of it. And there's the total draw. So we obviously have some events that we don't do multiple times. So we've added all of that up to the total number of events. So any questions on these here?
Parade, 20,000. That's, how do you come up with the number 20,000? What does that mean?
So that's when we have the Freedom Festival. That's just what we're guessing our draw is from
your
that.
Draw, not because the parade's a lot bigger than that. Right.
That's what we're drawing and promoting because of our involvement. I sat in on those planning committees as well, we'll take a small fraction of that with our efforts that we're putting into making that happen. This year, they've tossed around the idea of putting me on the board for the Freedom Festival, which I'm happy to do, and it seems like it would make sense for me to be on, or the director to be on that board. So we'll have a lot more involvement there at that level too. We'll be able to have a lot more presence as Downtown Provo as opposed to the Freedom Festival itself. So, any other questions on these?
Rooftops moving to Center Street this year.
Potentially.
Potentially, we're not there yet.
It's in discussion. I think that we're at capacity, past capacity, where it is right now. I thought it was a great turnout. We had a lot of positive feedback about having it in front of New Skin. I think the general consensus is that people would like to have it on the street. So yes, and thanks, Gary, for all of your help there to get that done. But we're not really sure yet. We're not really sure where we're going to put that. There's also the thought that the Wells Fargo building, it's about twice the size on the rooftop up there as Provo Town Square. So we may be able to have it there. That's just an idea. We haven't talked to Wells Fargo or I guess the their building, but we haven't talked to the property owner yet about that. But that's just a thought. It could go either place, but either way, where it is right now is probably too small for the amount of people we're bringing there. These are our membership breakdowns. We have a total of 94 paying members. That's not counting, we have about 20 members that offer us trade membership. So these are the members that have donated a cash value and their association with the packages that they've been. So we have a lot of people doing our small package. Generally, it's $150 that we're getting there. That's where we spend a big majority of our time. But those are also the businesses that probably need the help. So our bigger contributors are supplementing, helping the other businesses kind of succeed and just bring people down here. So we have five gold sponsors that total $60,000 in cash, which is a really big help. And we rely on some big relationships there, and we're trying to get a few more of those. My thought is the more $10,000 members we have, the more I can focus on not spending all of my time tracking down all the $150 memberships while still focusing on the businesses. So I'm hoping to get 10 of those, and that'll get us to our matching amount here with the city. And then anything additional, we'll still obviously be asking our members for a donation just so that they're invested and can continue to do that. Any questions here?
Wait, why are there only 14,000 if there are 18 members on the silver?
There's mixed with trade, so they'll do a trade with a cash donation. So someone may do $500 of cash, but also provide us with the service, or they'll provide us with a Lincoln lunch meal that they won't charge us for, something like that. So we still put them in that bracket.
What does that number compare with? How are those numbers compared to 13? Are we going up or down?
To 2013?
Going up or down?
I would assume they're going up. I'm hoping.
I'd be curious to know what the valuation of the trade equates to.
Yeah, our trade equates to about 25 grand. So we're sitting at about I think it's 92, somewhere around there, that we're bringing in from the actual cash donations with the $25,000. An example would be if you put a cash value on our app that's being developed, you can see what that price would be that's donated to us, which is probably I think it's $5,000 that we didn't have to come up with, that was given to us basically. So another big trade that we do that saves us quite a bit of money is our relationship with Coca-Cola, where they've taken over a lot of our minor operating expenses with printing, graphic design, and a lot of those things that we would have to pay for that now we're able to send over there and just have it done. So there's a lot of, Coke's been really involved. They've been a really good relationship for us. We're finalizing a contract right now. Just in case Pepsi were to come, we don't want to exclude them from being a member, and we can't, free market system, we can't say that you can and can't be a member. And so we're working out an agreement so that it makes sense for Coke to still do this for us, but we're not giving them exclusivity, basically. So we're drafting that right now just so that anyone who is worried about downtown becoming Coke Town, we're going to be able to avoid that. So.
Matt, when we were talking before, we were talking donations. Were those donations in kind also? Was the matching allowed for in-kind donations, services? Yes. I didn't know if we were looking a dollar for dollar match. We were looking for including.
You think just straight cash, not any trade?
I couldn't remember what our ordinance said.
If I remember right, it was the value of the dollar. I could be wrong, but we'd be that we would be a few $1,000s short if it was directly cash. But from looking at 2013, that wasn't the case necessarily. So there was some trade value in there with things like rent that were just basically supplemented and written off as an in-kind cash dollar value donation.
So our dollars, we're not sure exactly where we're at, and the numbers up or down as far as
2013?
From 2013.
Up. Our cash value is up since 2013 by about $10,000.
The actual cash received.
The cash received.
And the number of members that have joined is up.
Yes, that's correct.
From 2013.
That's right.
Okay, I'd be interested in looking at the numbers from what they were if we could have those from the last year.
I'll see if I can track them down.
It'd be nice to have a comparison.
Yeah, I'll track those down. We've just got a new CRM system that we've been able to get all of our members in there with their sign-up date, their transaction date, their amounts, all of that. And it's really easy to find the information once it's put in, and it'll run the reports automatically for us. So I'll just need to go and find that total dollar value from 2013 and what the total deposit amount was for members, and compare that to what it was this year, and I can email that number out as soon as I get that. It'll take me about a week or so to get that.
This is a huge year for us, I think. It's gonna, from what I understand, the dedication of that temple is going to be bigger than the Olympics, so we're hoping.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I would like to really hear what some of the plans that you guys have for that.
Yeah,
that event.
That's a great question. We have a lot of plans that we could use as much money as we'd be able to get and implement those. From what I understand, there's been a fund that's already been allocated to administration, and the administration decides who to divvy that amount out to. That's what I
fund from the church.
No, from the city.
Oh, okay.
So our projects are based on if we're able to get that funding from administration. And that's how I understand it. So there's already been a fund that has been set aside or allocated or distributed to administration, and if we were able to present a certain project, they're able to make the decision on where to set those funds.
What we told them was that I don't think the fund's been allocated. It's just that if they have any requests to go through administration, we can then make a request to the council for that allocation. So it has not been allocated yet.
There's not a specific fund that's already been.
But the administration is the one that told Mike you have to go through the administration and work with the administration because they're coordinating those efforts for the downtown Provo area.
One of the purposes, I think, of making that recommendation is that there is an administrative committee that's going to be looking at everything holistically, and DPI definitely fits into that picture. And then once the administration has a sense of where all the needs are, the council for a request.
I'm happy to take a look at some of your ideas on that, Mike, and see how we can be helpful and supportive there. Probably have maybe just a couple more minutes.
Okay, great. On that note,
I'm going to pick up on Jared's point and Gary's. It would be helpful to see a year-by-year comparison. And I encourage you to include in the bottom line the in-kind.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that for sure. So we do keep a record. This is our sales tax revenues just in the downtown area, and this you can get your comparison from 2013 and see where, except for May, I don't know what happened in May. We were down 1%, but every other month has been consistently very high, and we haven't got fourth quarter yet, so I don't have that information, but we've had a very, very significant amount of growth with sales tax revenues in our downtown this year.
It's encouraging.
Yeah, it's been, we've had a lot of businesses that have, like I said, we've had record years, record days, and so business is really really good right now in downtown.
Could you get a Shopko?
Working on it, right next to Target. So,
Really make that picture perfect.
we'll see what we can do there, I guess.
Nobody else thought that was as funny as I did. It was really funny.
We're getting close on time, so this is really the proposal for benchmarks for this year. Everything, I kept everything the same, just with maybe different initiatives on how we're going to do that exactly. And then we've added a few at the end. That's something I feel that we could add that will be a big benefit to us. So these are relatively the same as last year. We changed numbers to our Facebook likes and our social media traffic, things like that. So we'll keep trying to bump those up every year, which will keep increasing our followers and all of that. These are what I feel should be part of our benchmarks as an organization. It's something I'd like to implement these for this year. And it'll be improved member benefits package to appeal to all businesses to increase retention. Right now, we have you can buy small executive, silver, or gold, and maybe someone wants something in the gold, but not all of the gold, something like that. So we're trying to make it more of a Costco membership theory, where you can get your card done there, you can get your phone plan through there. When it comes time to renew your membership, you have so much going on through that membership that it's a no-brainer that are going to renew. So we just the CRM system that DPI is now using. For my first business, I paid about $30,000 for this system that all of our downtown members can now have for free. You have to be a member with downtown, and you can utilize that. That right there is worth being a member. We've got the UTA passes, the rec center discount. So we're trying to build this package of not just we're going to put events downtown and you can come to a Lincoln lunch. You can still do those, but we also want to have some tangible items that bring the value there. So we'll be working on that. We just implemented committees from our board. This will really help where we're right now a two-person organization with a couple of interns. We've built our committees out to kind of help offset the workload, and it'll be a lot more efficient for all of us. So we have a membership committee, which Tiff is actually on, and she's been really great about it, just kind of championing DPI, talking to other members, or new businesses that come to downtown, encouraging them to sign up, and then maybe setting a time for me to go over and meet with them, and at least have a warm lead as opposed to door knocking, if that makes sense. So it's just been great, and it's worked out a lot. Play Unplugged, we'll be doing that this summer. It's a strategy to get kids off electronics and into your stores to go collect brag tags. Is anyone unfamiliar with the
They gave us a presentation.
Okay, so we'll be doing that here. Promotion of the Covey Center, I feel like that's really under promoted. They have a lot of traffic there, and I feel like we should be able to market downtown Provo with the traffic that's going there, as well as send people to the Covey Center from our outlets as well. And then overall preparation and beautification for the City Center Temple open house. I could give you a big long list of what that means exactly. So we have a lot of ideas and plans. So probably the biggest, in my opinion, would be to take advantage of the front runner and do as much as we can to sort of connect the front runner station with downtown before that happens. There's a number of ways we can do that with lighting situations and just improving some of the fronts that are out there, so you feel like you can get off the UTA station and you're walking in downtown right off the bat. So that's a lot of work to make it happen by the time the temple opens, especially since we don't know exactly when that is. So that off the top of my head would be a really big priority for us, so that people can take advantage of that.
Well, thank you, Mike. A very helpful report and summary of your work. We certainly appreciate all the good things you're doing.
Absolutely.
Group. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? I don't mind. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. We'll move now to discussion on a potential voting by mail program presented by Janine Weiss.
I'm
Sure you never got it.
Americanized the last name.
As she's coming up, let me acknowledge that she's not had tons of time to get ready for this, and that's my fault, but thank you.
No problem. I don't mind. I love talking about elections anyway. So, what I want to start with, thank you for this opportunity, just to kind of get the ball rolling and just to kind of get some thoughts going, because I would like to have a decision made by the end of February, sometime in March, just so that we can begin getting ready for the elections. It's going to be a busy one this year. So the Utah League of Cities and Towns prepared a short presentation, and I thought I would share it with you just to kind of give you a little bit of background and some of the information that they have talked about. First of all, what is vote by mail? Basically, what it is that a ballot is mailed out to every single registered voter in the city of Provo. And those ballots, per law, need to be mailed out at least about 28 days before the election. That is so that people who live out of state or even out of the country have plenty of time to receive their ballot and can mark it and return it back. So, so the ballot is mailed out, and then voters, once they receive that ballot, they will have it in hand what's going to be on that ballot. You would not believe the number of calls I get a week before the election or even on election day saying, now what's on the ballot? And who's running? And I just think, my goodness, and you're going to go vote? So this gives them the opportunity to have a ballot right in their hands, and that gives them the time to study the issues, study the candidates, see what they stand for before they actually cast that vote. Voters, once they receive that ballot, can then mail it back in a postage paid envelope. The envelope has a place on the back of it where they sign their name, and that's how we verify their voter identification. There's a flap that goes over that signature, so it's not going through the mail and without a flap. So that that signature is verified with the Utah County voter registration records, and then they could mail it in if they really want to vote on election day, which a lot of people did. Davis County had a vote by mail election in 2014, and they were surprised at the number of people that really wanted to vote on election day. We have voting centers available, which is, I'm thinking maybe at the rec center and maybe one other one, but where people can come and actually surrender their ballot. They turn in their absentee ballot that they received, and then they can vote there on election day. So that's an option. Or we could have, there are also drop boxes, one here at the city center and maybe another city building in the city, where people can take that absentee ballot and actually drop it in the drop box so that they know it's been received. I know a lot of people are concerned, well, how do I know that my ballot was received? Well, every single ballot has a number specific to that ballot. And the company that prints those ballots for us, K&H Printing up in Washington, they send us a file that lists all of the voters and the ballot that was assigned to them. And so that person can go online and look up that ballot number and verify whether or not their ballot was received. So those are the ways that you can actually vote. And then the voter must again sign that ballot in order for it to count. Because of that, there would be no early vote because people already have their ballots. And then it says the county or the city. State law says the county or city does not have to have a voting center, but I would really prefer to have one, at least one, maybe two. So let's look at voter turnout. In 2012, these are some of the voter turnouts for some of the cities that went on an all vote by mail. In Minnesota, some of the small cities had an all vote by mail, and they had a 76% turnout. Now, I am not by any stretch of the imagination saying that's what we're going to have. That would be silly. But for instance, in 2013, Provo City mailed out 1,769 absentee ballots. Of those 1,769, we had 1,043 returned. That is above 50%. Now, again, I'm not guaranteeing a 50% turnout, but that's the options. One of the things I think is interesting, in the United States, the voter turnout is 58%. Utah ranks 39th at 59%, and it gets kind of scarier.
Jane, do you happen to know on those figures how those states were before they implemented the vote by mail?
I don't. Colorado, I was reading up, and Colorado said that their vote by mail doubled their voter turnout. Some of the other, maybe it was Oregon also. But those three, it's interesting. These three states are all vote by mail. They're all in the West. And I was reading on it, and in the East, there are some states that don't even allow voting by mail. And there are other states that if you vote by mail, you have to have an excuse. In other words, I'm going to be out of the country, or I'm bedridden. And I thought that was really interesting. So in Utah, in 1980, Utah was in the top 10 for voter turnout. By 2010, Utah is in the bottom 5. And this is another interesting. I threw this screen in there just to personalize it a little bit for us. Here's Provo City's voter turnout. I started out in 1999, and these are just the municipal elections that we've held. Here we're at 19, 25, 26, 29, here's 30, almost 37%. Well, that year was the year they had the school vouchers, if you remember. That was a huge turnout. Then we dropped down to 18%, here's 8%. And then in 2013, it was 15%. Now, the one thing you'll notice, here is the voter turnout, and here's the registered voters. These, there was a big push during those 2 years to get people to register. And so a lot of people registered, but I guess they registered and just thought, oh, well, I registered. They didn't even bother to go out and vote once they registered. But the county in 2012 went through their voter registration files, and they eliminated, as you can see, almost 20,000 people that were registered, took them off the registration rolls because they hadn't voted in a certain amount of time, and so that's why that number has gone back down. And so we're down. I looked it up, and if these 2 years matched voter registration, this one would have been about 25%, this one would have been a halfway decent 12%.
Everyone was so excited to cast their ballot for Gary.
Well, if you'll remember, also in 2011, we didn't even have a primary for the citywide, and for your district, District 1, we didn't have a primary election. So it wasn't just people coming out to vote; it was even people wanting to run. It was a really slow.
It's what
year.
they call an off year because there were no mayor, there was no. Congressman, no governor.
Yeah.
None of those things were involved.
Yeah. So I just threw that slide in just to show you what Provo City's current voter turnout is. So who voted by mail in 2013? These are the Utah cities that voted by mail in 2013. Now you'll notice there aren't really a lot of big, large cities.
West Jordan's over 100,000 though, right?
Yeah, well, other than West Jordan, and West Jordan is actually a fairly good city to compare with Provo because they have about 41,000 registered voters. We have a little more than 42,000, so we're really close. They don't have a college, they don't have the students, but their population is very similar, and their voter registration is very similar. And so in 2013, their voter turnout was 35%. In 2011, it was 15%. So they doubled their voter registration, their voter turnout by going with the vote by mail. So now we have our voter turnout. What other costs do we need to what else do we need to consider? Well, so let's look at this. Some of the concepts that people talk about. Here's some of the supporters and some of the critics. Some of the supporters say it increases the voter turnout, and I think that's kind of been shown just for the few cities. And Davis County did it in 2000, 2014, their voter turnout was extremely high too. So I think that's kind of been proven. But there's other things, reduced costs. Now this might not apply to Provo, as you'll see later in just a moment. But it gives the voters more time to prepare their ballots and to think about what's on the ballot and to study the issues. And no poll workers. We don't have to hire poll workers, which, believe me, is a challenge. In 2013, our last municipal election, the day before the election, I was juggling poll workers. I had to reduce the amount of poll workers at some locations and move them to other locations because we just couldn't find poll workers. It's a challenge, especially when you're only paying $100 for a whole day's worth of work. So that's a challenge. Another thing that I was going to say is it's going to, no, that was all. I was over here on the critics because I have another thing. So it impacts the turnout. You're going to have to change the way we campaign, because a lot of times people, when they get that ballot, they're going to look at it, they're going to study it, and then they're going to mail it in 3 or 2 weeks before the election. And a lot of times there's that big push the week or two before the election. You have debates, you have everything else that's going on. It's going to really affect how you as council members actually campaign and run your elections. I talked to one potential council member this year who has stated he's going to run, and he says, oh, that doesn't bother me. He says, I've already started campaigning. So, but it will. It'll make a big difference. The cost savings are nullified by increased postage, and this is where Provo's comes in. Our cost savings we aren't going to have any cost savings. It's going to almost double our election costs, simply because we're mailing out ballots to every single citizen. And I found out from the printing company that a municipal election doesn't qualify for a reduced postal rate. When the county runs an election and they can mail out their ballots, they qualify for a reduced rate. So this is something I'm going, that doesn't sound right. So I'm going to look into that. But that's what the printing company told me at the time. More susceptible to voter fraud. That's, I think, the biggest thing that everyone has told me when I've talked to them about it. They've said, people are just going to go to the mailboxes and take out people's ballots and mail in all these ballots. And my husband's going to really pressure me to vote for someone. And so those are some of the things that when they talk about voter fraud, those are some of the concerns that they have, and they're legitimate concerns, but they can be addressed. And then more voting errors, those are just some of the concerns that have been expressed. So let's look at some of the benefits. First of all, no bad weather concerns. You don't have to worry about getting out in the middle of the rain or in the snow and going to vote. Again, West Jordan increased their voter turnout from 14 to 35%. Moroni increased from 30 to 62%. And so the voter turnout will really help. All 19 cities that had a vote by mail in 2013 had increased turnout. Now, I don't know if some of that was due to who was running, but the bottom line is that they all increased their turnout in one way or another. Riverdale City election costs went down. West Jordan saved $24,000 in 2013. And then 15 of the 19 Utah cities saved money, whereas the rest of them had a slight increase. Now, I want to stop right here. Let me just go to this next slide, because this shows Provo City's election costs. In 2001, it goes over here. These last two are the estimated costs for 2015 elections. This is a vote by mail, and this would be if we contracted with Utah County. And you'll see that it's extremely high. And again, that's because we're mailing out a ballot to every registered voter. There's two other things that play into these two things as compared to West Jordan. West Jordan contracts with Salt Lake County. And Salt Lake County, I was surprised at how much they charge the cities to run to do their elections for them. Utah County, with all of its problems and with all of our concerns, really gives us a great deal. I mean, they charge us, in 2013, they only charged us $32,000 and that's to rent the equipment and to put it all up. and to do all of our, get all of our election supplies. And that was a really good deal compared to Salt Lake County. The other thing you have to look at is that poll workers, Utah County pays $100 per day for poll workers and $180 for for poll managers. Salt Lake County pays $175 per poll worker and $250 for poll managers. And Scott Hoganson at the county told me that they are really seriously considering raising Utah County's amounts next year, which means that we in turn would have to raise ours. So while there's a huge disparity here, in the future it won't be that big if we did not go with vote by mail, because we would need to pay our poll workers a lot more. Because if you think about it, they're getting paid about $5 an hour to work at the polls, and it's an all-day thing. So those are just some of the concerns. That's the election costs. And then they discuss some of the concerns. First of all, voter fraud. He says there's been little evidence of voter fraud in Oregon, and they've been having vote by mail in one form or another since 1980. Lost or tampered ballots, we can track the ballots online. So if I live in my home and I don't receive a ballot, I can call the county and they can issue me a new one, and I can find out if I voted, and then that will tell me that if I have all my neighbors missing their ballots, that would tell me something. We can submit the ballot at the election office or the official site. Another concern is there would be no poll workers to check the signatures, but the signatures are checked at the site, at the vote headquarters, that when the ballots come in. And then every signature on a vote by mail ballot is verified. And the thing that's good about that is it gives us time, if there's a problem or a question, to contact the voter and say, hey, your signature didn't match. Can you come in and verify something? And we can call and have time to work out some of these problems. I know in years past, I received several ballots that weren't signed. We contact them, come in and have them sign and verify their signature. Or one time, this poor little old lady, I've gone out 3 times to her home to have her sign her ballot because she can't get out of her home. So that gives us time to handle and address some of the concerns and to go through all of those.
And how are those signatures verified? Where do you have signatures?
Utah County, through their voter registration records, we have access to those during the election season. So we can go online, pull it up, and we verify that signature. If there's any question, we can always double check it and contact the voter. Because some people's signature changes. Mistakes on ballots, undervotes or overvotes. Studies show that vote by mail voters make fewer errors than in-person voters, and they can request a new ballot if they mark in pen and decide, oh, I want to change my mind, then they can request a new ballot. So they have time to do that. Timing with voter registration timeline, that is an issue right now. Because I know that there's some things in the state legislature. In fact, Salt Lake County is on pilot program to do a same-day voter registration. You vote, you register, and then you vote on the same day, and they're doing a pilot of that. So this kind of is all up in the air right now. But right now, if you come in and register to vote after the ballots have already been sent, we can still mail you a ballot or get you a ballot. That's not a problem. Voter coercion at home. It's possible, but the voter also has more privacy and time to decide. So we hope that no one's being forced at home. Election fraud in the United States, from 2000 to 2011, there have been 51 cases of alleged election fraud in Utah and 0 cases of election vote by mail fraud. And we've had 1.5 million registered voters, which gives us, for every registered voter, that's a very, very small percentage of election fraud. And in the United States, they've had 2,068 cases of alleged election fraud, 491 cases of vote by mail fraud, and 146 million registered voters, that's a percentage of fraud. Now, again, this is just what's been verified, but there is no way to guarantee, and that's the thing. There's just no way to guarantee that won't happen. So, consequences of vote by mail. If we find that someone has taken a ballot or done something, they can obviously be fined up to $10,000 and up to 5 years in prison. So there are consequences of fraud if we can find it and locate it. But like I said, little evidence of election fraud in Utah or the USA. So that's Utah League of Cities and Towns presentation. That's what they talked about. So, do you have any questions? How? Okay.
Some of them out of curiosity. The other is this, are there potential sources aside from the city's budget for underwriting the costs of mailing? And the second question out of curiosity is, what if I drop my ballot in the mailbox on my way to a polling place?
You must have been talking to Bryce. Bryce asked me that very question this morning. I love it. Great minds think alike. First of all, I'm not aware of any other financial ways we could support the election. I don't know of any. I can look into it and see if it's possible, but I don't know that there's a grant that would cover that. I think if there was, all the grant money would be definitely taken. When you vote, if you go to vote in person at one of the voting centers, you are asked to surrender your vote by mail ballot. So if you get to the voting center and you say, I want to vote in person, they'll say, okay, you need to surrender your ballot. If you don't have your ballot, then what they'll do is they'll have you vote provisionally, which means you vote and they put it in this little envelope right here, and it's a provisional ballot. And what will happen is they will go and verify that the ballot that was mailed to you wasn't voted. And if it was, then that's kind of...
That's right.
Does federal law apply in this case? Because it's not a federal election.
Yes, because election, yeah. And well, do you know what? Even if it isn't a federal law, it would be a state law for voter fraud. So if we find that your ballot wasn't returned, then we would count your provisional vote. Right.
You are devious.
Didn't you say that it has to be postmarked the day before?
Oh, yes, thank you. Vote by mail ballots need to be postmarked the day before the election. So this year they would have to be postmarked by November 2nd in order to count. And even postmarked by November 2nd, we could be getting ballots a week and a half after the election. Now those ballots that are put in ballot boxes or drop boxes, you could come here to the city center, put it in the drop box and go vote. But again, you're voting provisionally because you don't have the ballot that was mailed to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dave first, please.
I was just wondering if this presentation would be available to send to our constituents.
Absolutely. I can, in fact, Bryce has it, so I send it to Bryce so we can mail that out.
You just upload it to the public portal and get a link from there.
There's also, there's a few other links that I think would be good. Davis County did the vote by mail in 2014, and on their website, they had a really good video that they made that talked about the vote by mail, and that was really good. Now on vote by mail, what we would do is we would mail out to all the registered voters, we would mail out a notice saying, by the way, this year you'll be getting a ballot in the mail to vote. It'll give them the instructions, and then it'll tell them the dates when they can expect to receive that ballot. So this will require a lot of marketing, if you will. Because we need to let the citizens know that this is how it would be. And so we would mail out that notice to them and saying, if you haven't received your ballot within 5 days of this date, please contact the election office and we'll, we can see we can find out what's going on.
So you're actually doing 2 mailings to each
Yes.
registered voter.
Yeah, the first mailing would be from here. The ballots themselves are mailed out of the Washington office through the printer.
Jean, has there been much discussion on Provo City, where particularly we have a lot of students who most of the times aren't very interested in the vote? They're not, they don't even pay attention to who's running.
Mm-hmm.
Where now they have a ballot, how invested are they in really filling
Only,
up?
remember, they have to be registered.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Okay, that answers the question.
There is some percentage.
Yeah, there is, yes, there is definitely a small percentage, and I know there are some that will go out and encourage the students to register, and so that will be an issue.
That might be a new element in the vote, campaigning process.
I think it'll have a bigger impact on national votes than it
These
will
are
on
off-year
local.
elections.
Yeah, and off-year elections.
I don't think you'll get
In municipal elections, in the even-numbered years, the only people on the ballot are your council members, your mayor. Those are the only ones. We don't have any other candidates. But that's a great question.
Would vote by mail help with that problem, or would it hinder? You know what I mean? Would it? I guess if everybody is getting a ballot, you're going to have more people voting, which makes that component less of an issue if someone did go recruit students. See what I'm saying?
They would be
diluted by the.
It would dilute it because more of the Provo City residents that are not students, would be voting as well. So it seems almost like that could be more of a turning point if we didn't have vote by mail than if we did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Or not.
And it could, depending on if a candidate goes out and really pushes for students to register. Now, one of the things that, I can't remember who I was talking to, but anyway, and that would be working with BYU, UVU, and helping them understand that when your students register, they're saying they're Utah residents. That means that any registration, anything that they have out of the state, they are now saying that this is their residency, not their hometowns. And so it could affect their parents. If their parents claim them as dependents, it could make a big difference. And so I think it would be important to also include that in the marketing, where working with the schools to help the students understand, hey, when you register, this is what you're doing. And I hope you understand that.
Do we know what percentage of the 30,000 plus students are residents?
I
Do you
don't.
have any of that information?
I don't.
What part of our?
When you register, the only way you could really find out is just to go by age, because it doesn't. When you ask for registration records, it doesn't give you occupations. It doesn't say who's students. So it'd be really hard. You'd have to go through those registration records one by one and kind of determine age and housing and.
I just wondered in our census for 117,000 people in Provo, if they know how many are in school. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it matters that much.
I don't know.
Approximately 30% matriculated students are residents. That doesn't speak to the issue of registration.
Yeah.
Or UVU.
Or UVU.
Yeah. And, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, considering students, Joe Smith, Jane Doe, they're all students, and they move, and yet there's always students. You know what I mean? The individuals change, but there will always be students, and I think the students are kind of represented in a way. If they can register, then they're representing students as opposed to themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're representing the student vote, so that the students can maybe have a feel for parking and for other things. And I think that's where it would come into play. But for students to register, you'd have to really have a big push. They really they aren't that interested.
You reported that there would be an increase in cost by percentage. You didn't say how much that would be. I didn't know if the administration has given any thought to how vote by mail could be funded.
We'd have to include it in our budget. find a way to finance it.
Could we charge the ballots?
Well, the actual, you want the direct or indirect cost of the ballots?
For sure, the direct
Can I just,
percentage.
can I kick around a couple of,
Under here, poll tax.
can I kick around a couple of procedural questions? I don't know, Brian, that code addresses, and maybe you know if code addresses anything that would need to be changed if we wanted to do vote by mail.
I'd have to look into it. I don't know off the top of my head.
So-
I think that it's just an issue of making sure we comply with the state checklist.
So I'm not sure exactly what the administration is asking today. For instance, are we simply asking for, hey, are we all on the same page if we go out and do this, or are we looking for an ordinance change, even if it's not allowed to specifically request this, or are we simply looking for the voice of the council to say, yes, we support this? Probably a minimum of a voice of the council to say, yes, this is something that we support. If we don't make a decision to do this very quickly, well, shortly, we've made a decision not to do it.
That's what you said. Early March, you said, by the end of the decision.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a preference then, not to go for a legislative action unless one is required because of that slowing down the process, but more a nod from the council, whether it's official or unofficial, that they're supportive, if they are supportive of the administration moving forward on this.
But are you approaching it as an experimental
Do you know of any cities that have gone back to vote by mail and then back to?
I think the concept is new enough that there hasn't been. I do know that Orem, Donna in Orem, they are also looking at this, considering it very seriously. And so I know that, and Cedar Hills also is. In fact, Cedar Hills, I'm pretty sure, is doing a vote by mail. Highland City turned it down, so they didn't. They says, let's wait a few years. But I do know that there are cities in Utah County that are moving towards at least trying it. Riverton, is it Riverton? Approved it.
So to Mr. Miller's question, I think I would prefer to rephrase that and say, no, it's not an experiment, but I'm happy with a one-year approval to make sure that it's a good thing. So on a personal level, I believe that we're quickly passing a day where it's realistic to say to somebody, you have to vote at a certain location on a certain day. And we're going to lose our younger demographic in voting if we insist on holding them to that standard. They don't get that at all. They buy a car by using their cell phone. They don't understand why they need to go on a certain day to a certain location to vote. So I actually think I feel strongly it's a move in the right direction if we've checked all of our boxes and feel good about what we have here. And should the council give us the nod, we would move rather quickly to initiate this into our next election cycle.
One other thing to consider is, I don't know about you, but I have heard so many times people will come up and say, I just don't know where. I vote a different place every year. One year I vote here, the next year I vote here, the next year I vote here. I get that a lot. And that's simply because of the difference. First of all, the county's running the election one year, we're running the election another year. The way our polling locations match up don't always work. There's schools that have it and schools that don't. And another thing that we need to consider is in the future is the safety of the schools. If you think about it, the majority of our polling locations are in schools. And with school safety, a big issue right now, do we really want, on election day, do we really want a lot of people going into those schools? And that's one of the things that was discussed on a nationwide search that I did. They were talking about schools are starting to maybe try and get away from having polling locations there simply because of security issues. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to consider. Kim?
So you mentioned that the county only charges 35,000, but the total cost for our city is around 60.
Yes,
And
because
so it'd be an increase of
yeah,
60
that doesn't
we're
include
looking
the
at.
poll workers. So the poll workers on top of what the county charges, and then incidentals that we buy, like for instance, I buy donuts and bagels for our poll workers because they're there all day.
Let me say this, try to say it carefully, but I think we're getting what we're paying for. It's a very low quality service and very fair. Let me not put you on the spot, but it's been frustrating working with the county.
Would you estimate the cost of going to vote by mail? What percentage of the current expenses have you retained?
Oh, let's see. We won't have poll workers. I'm trying to think. It's almost a completely different. We would still need to get some of the voting records and election day, so maybe 15%.
There will be still machines and some poll workers at these.
Yes. Yeah, I will still need to have some poll workers. I will need to hire someone, a temporary poll workers to help when the ballots come in, because the ballots are going to be coming in during that 4-week period. And as the ballots come in, we don't wait until election day to go do everything. We verify the signatures, we open the ballot, prepare it, get it ready for scanning, and then once a week you scan those ballots. And so I would need to have someone help verify the signatures. I'm not going to go through and verify 42,000 signatures. Of course, we wouldn't get that many. Well, maybe we would. Who knows? But so there are some additions. So the costs are different. They really don't compare.
Right, but you showed us the estimate, and so if we assume 15% of that estimate, well, I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but at least we'll retain at least 15% of the current costs, and then the remainder will be for postage.
No, because that whole remainder is not for postage. Part of that cost is not only the postage, but also renting the scanning equipment and getting the equipment to actually scan the ballots and programming and having someone on site from the company. I've been working with this Dana at Dominion Voting, and so we would need to rent the equipment. So it's not just the ballots and the mailing, it's the equipment also, where right now we don't have to rent the equipment because that comes in through the county.
At some point it might be helpful to provide us with a cost breakdown.
I actually have that, and I was going to include it in a slide, and I can have him send that to you if you would like, because I have it broken down from the past 3 elections. It breaks it down for how much we've spent on poll workers, everything else, and I can send that to you. Pardon? To all of you, yes. What? Did you have a question?
No, I was going to say send it to Matt.
Oh, send it to Matt. You're just sitting there talking, are you?
Can you see why we have so much faith in Janine? Isn't she amazing?
No, I'm not. But thank you. I appreciate that. So, any other questions?
Well, anyone who goes to the home of someone who is homebound 3 times, one wonders, why wasn't she at home?
Well, do you know
The homebound person.
I honestly, I feel really bad, and I'm glad I went, because I think she was just lonely, and I think every year she just does it intentionally, just to have somebody come and visit her, and I don't mind doing that. So, Dave, did you have a question?
I was just wondering what kind of public outreach has been done on this in terms of educating people and sort of getting
Right now, we haven't really done a lot. I've talked to a few people. Whenever I see people, I ask them, well, what do you think about this idea? And a lot of them really like it, but I think the voter fraud issue is the one that really comes up the most, is how do you prevent it? And that's just by verifying the signatures and verifying the ballots. Every ballot has a name attached to it, and we can verify whether or not that ballot was received. And we can verify the signature of that person. So, and I asked the county today, I says, well, you know, right now you can register online and all you have to have is a driver's license. So how do we get a signature that way? And he says if they do that, then the driver license division has their signature on file and they just send it to the voter registration records. So we still have a signature, even if you register online. Gary.
Personally, I like this idea. I think it will increase our voter turnout. And I know it's a weird year because for me anyway, because I get to play in this year. But I wonder if we started this year, I think we should as soon as we can, but would we be better off starting it in a presidential year where voting's maybe a little bit more on people's mind with some questions?
Now, the presidential year, we don't run on our own. The county runs the presidential elections.
So would voting by mail be out at that time?
Well, that's up to the county. I know Scott at the county, he had asked for some additional budget this year to see if he could help do a vote by mail, and they said no, but he's really taking a good look at this because, as I said, Davis County did it last year. And so I think some of the other counties are really starting to take a look at it. Some of the smaller counties, especially in southern Utah, most of them will probably go to a vote by mail eventually, simply because the spread out, they're so spread out. So I think it's just
confusion then. Is this the year I got my mail, or do I vote if I don't get it? Should I call? Will it be?
Well, I think and that's a good question, because if we do a vote by mail on a municipal and then the county doesn't, that's a valid question. But West Jordan did it, and they didn't have any problems last year with the 2014 election. So there are 3 cities right now in Salt Lake County that will be doing the vote by mail, and they did them, and they didn't have any problems.
So they do their own vote by mail, and then the county does a separate.
No, all the cities, there's 16 cities in Salt Lake County, and every single one of those contract with Salt Lake County to do their election. Now, when I say run the election, I don't mean it's kind of like, here, take over, this is all yours. It's just basically supplying the election equipment and supplies, the ballots, the registration books, the machines, the touch screens, whatever they need.
So let me understand that. So you're saying if there's a national election where we're voting for senators, governor, and then we will not send anything out.
Provo City would not.
Provo would not, even though we have municipal leaders that will be elected.
No, because there are no municipal elections that year. In the even numbered years, in 2015, we'll have your position and the council positions. In 2016, it will be simply state, county, federal, school boards, judges, everything other than municipals.
Okay, and then the last question that I had, as far as announcing any, there should not be any interim reporting on what has been done in that 4-week period.
Oh, no. The ballots are scanned, but the reports are not run. They cannot be released. I'm glad you asked that question, because that's an interesting question, because in Davis County, they found that on election day, you have all the ballots that have been received up to that point, and then you have anyone that voted on election day. So you have election results posted on election day. But those results, as you all are aware, are not final until it's been canvassed, which is a week to 2 weeks later. During that time, there were several ballots that came in, and it actually changed one of the bonds that they had. Initially, the bond said it failed, but then after all of the votes that came in during that 2-week period, it actually passed. And so, again, that is one of the things that you need to consider, is that the ballots that are received during that 2-week period that were postmarked before the election day, they will be counted. And those, right now, according to state law, those cannot be released until the canvass, which is 2 weeks after the election. The state is hoping to be able to reduce that amount of time so that you're not waiting 2 weeks, especially in a close election. You're not waiting 2 weeks to find out what's going on. So that is one of the inherent problems with the vote by mail, is that the ballots come in.
And you won't be announcing any votes until 2 weeks after the election.
We would announce the votes on election night what we've received up to that point. And then anything that we receive after that point, we have to wait for the 2 weeks to release it.
Been there, done that.
Yes, you know.
That's why she comes after some time to ask the council to certify.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, one option here is to ask that legislation be prepared. That could be discussed at our next work session, so it's kind of the intermediate step before we take it to a council meeting in 4 weeks. That's one option for a motion.
Question straw.
Straw poll. Question?
I like that approach. I would make that motion. Does that still get us within our time frame?
So-
Does that would give us time to kind of
Then
get the word out?
I would, if you don't need legislation, I would rather see you do a resolution or something because of the possibility of getting weighted down with legislation that's not as high as getting weighted down with the resolution.
Why don't we ask for a straw poll then of those that would be interested in pursuing vote by mail initiative here in Provo City?
Just a question on that. So the vote would be then that we would want to go forward with this. It's not just, oh, I'm interested. It's a,
You're not committing yourself, but we start the machine moving.
So I really like vote by mail. I do it for partisan elections and love being able to have time to, you know, all the things you mentioned. Love being able to have time, love being able to just put it in the mail, and if I choose to deliver it that day, to do that. I just love the flexibility. So I'm all for it, but the budget is the thing that concerns me, just the amount that we would be paying. So I would like a little more time to kind of mull that over, but my initial reaction is, yeah, I think this would be really great. I like the idea that every citizen has a ballot in their hands, whether they choose to do with that. But I think it would increase our our turnout, and I think that would be huge, just there alone. So my initial reaction is, yes, I'm all for it. I just have budgetary concerns, and I just want to make sure that
Just a observation. If I remember the unity or governance sections of Vision 2030, there are goals to increase voter turnout and other such. So it is a policy of the city to encourage these things.
Mr. Miller? Okay, so in a straw poll sense, how many would favor moving in this direction?
Moving in the direction
of a vote by mail, pursuing a vote by mail option in our city.
With the caveat that I think it's an important enough change that I think we should get some information out and make the decision in 2 or 4 weeks.
And those opposed?
I'm just,
on the fence.
I'm not strong to say yes, let's go forward.
So other than some budgetary information and a specific breakout and how we would budget it, can you give us other things that would help you cement around whether or not you'd like to move forward?
I'd like to see a draft resolution.
Great.
Public feedback.
Public feedback?
Can I share one thing?
Yes.
One thing that we could do that I think might be helpful would be for us to go in and do 2 scenarios. One is that we continue our current voting practices, but we look at what we think is going to happen and what we're really paying poll workers in the future, similar to what Salt Lake's doing. Kind of forecast that model and then compare that with voter by mail model and see how they compare cost-wise. Would that be helpful?
I think so, John. Thank you.
We'll work with you.
I've started that, and it came really close, but I can give you the numbers that I have, and we can just tweak them to make them look good. And I'll make sure I get it sent.
Look at the what?
Well. Yeah, so it's pretty, you know? So it doesn't go, whoa.
maybe a question for Mr. Sewell on voter feedback. Is that something you'd like to do, or are you looking to us to go gather some, or both? What would you prefer to?
Well, both, since you could probably get 10 times the feedback that we could, so we appreciate that.
Maybe dedicated.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple things we can do. I was going to mention it's hard for us to engage in a full-on marketing campaign though, until kind of a decision has been made. But we can get snapshots and stuff of how the community feels and try to deal with some of that, so that I can sit down and work with Matt on.
Okay, that's more of our strength in our communication, is to ask the policy questions. So we
have
definitely
nice precedent here to deal with the outreach for the master downtown metro.
Definitely.
So, great. We'll figure it out.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your questions. You're great.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to Mr. Maxfield. Brian?
I know you're running short on time. I'll try and do the condensed version if that's okay. Last spring, you did have a annexation presentation made, which involved about 180 acres north the Canyon Road area. That failed because it left an island. The petitioners to the south part of that, Area 3, I think was the name of it at that time, they've since returned. I think you encouraged that at that time for people to come back and see if we can annex that. So we've got 60 acres on the south end of that annexation that now has a new petition to be annexed into the city. We have all the property owners have signed. We had one who didn't sign on this petition. They signed on the previous one, and from their agent, we understand that they're okay with the annexation. It's not the issue. So it looks like everyone's unanimously in that corner. We did have slides, if you care, that shows kind of a conceptual layout. One of the questions became water service in that area, basically pressure in the water system. David Day's here to address any questions on that. But through the solutions kind of given up by the possible developer of the property, it gave us the means to get the water pressure which we would need to service the majority of that area. And I think what they've also proposed is that you possibly consider an annexation agreement with the property owners that would just put the notice down of what they need to do to develop the properties through the process. Any questions?
So that would be written into the annexation agreement, not necessarily a developer, a separate agreement. It would just be written right into the annexation agreement as well.
Well, the annexation agreement is an agreement with the applicants and or developers or anybody that have interest in land. So.
It's the same thing that was mentioned in the ROA, the Planning Commission ROA. It's the same.
Right.
But that's how you would handle it through the annexation agreement.
Right. The Planning Commission talked about it, but they really don't have a say in those agreements, and that's why they didn't really make that part of the motion. But it was discussed at that time, and they had.
Bring up that PowerPoint. I'm David Day with Public Works, and just wanted to kind of go over the issues that Public Works has with the annexation. Not against it, we just want to be upfront and transparent about the costs of developing this property. Go to the next one. Okay, and so you've probably seen this before in your packet. That's just showing the area. But right now, this blue area shows where we can currently service with water pressure. And you can see how that just kind of goes along Canyon Road there. Canyon Road being right along here. And so it goes about maybe one or two lots. I know Tony's house is right in there, and he's kind of right on the edge of water pressure. So, and that's coming out of that tank right there. We have to have a little over 100 feet of elevation difference to develop the pressure we need to service that area. So the next slide would be this middle area. In order to service that area with water pressure. A couple options are available. Building a new tank up in along this contour. We've shown it up here, but it could go anywhere along that area, and in addition to that, drilling a water line over from the other tank up into that area. So, what's the name of that pressure? Northeast tank would be that middle pressure zone.
Where is the northeast tank?
Northeast tank is, I think, on the end of Imperial Drive. Next, yeah, right. If you drive right to the end of Imperial, there's a tank right there.
In Sherwood Hills?
Yeah.
Where the road splits up.
Yeah, in Sherwood Hills, but it's right at the end of Imperial. So, but the pressure zone, they could tie into it right on Foothill Drive at about 650 east. So, and then to go higher would require another tank that's the same elevation as the Sherwood Hills tank, which is directly east of East Lawn Cemetery. So that would be an additional zone to get up even higher. You can see the annexation area. That's leaving out just a little bit of that area. We're estimating somewhere around $4.5 million to be able to do both of those areas. Of course, this is a rather small area to be able to afford that price tag, so there is a fair amount of unannexed area that could be joined in to pay for that cost. I think we're about 56 acres in this annexation area, which leaves about another 150 acres of additional unannexed property in that area. Sewer improvements, about 0.6 million, and 2.1 million in storm drain improvements. That would be the entire unannexed area in this part of town. Then just wanted to point out that there are a fair amount of slopes in the area that exceed our 30% slope ordinance. So just wanted to point all of that out to you. Do you have any questions on any of that information? Gary?
The millions for the water, that would be, they're not asking the city or anything to front that.
Well, you know, that's a conservative estimate. I'm sure maybe a developer could whittle that down and find out a more economical
But a developer would
solution.
put that in,
Developer
deed
would
it to the city.
Then turn it over to the city to operate and maintain.
That's the life expectancy
Uh,
for these systems.
What do we build our tanks to last? How long? The longevity.
50, 60 years, 70 if we can get away with it.
Yeah, so then that would be, have to program that into our overall fee structure to be able to pay to replace that over time.
So what was the total then? You've got the water?
It's about around 7 million.
Okay.
We're thinking.
And would,
if you took the whole 200, little over 200 acres in that unannexed area, it's probably around 25 to 30,000 an acre.
And
depending on how many units you get out of that, you know, you'll have to divide that out on the cost of lots. So.
And would that burden go on that initial developer then? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, we just wanted to present that so that everyone can discuss that as we're considering annexing, and we're not going to have somebody come in the future and say, hey, nobody told us about this. Just want to be upfront so that everybody knows.
Has it been a policy in the past to, when that happens, if that investment was made as those other acres are annexed, is there any kind of payback or return?
Yeah.
Or is the first guy the one that...
One of the things that I've been thinking through to try to make it fair to everyone is maybe you say, okay, everybody who's in that area that can directly benefit. Maybe they all share in that overall price tag somehow. I don't know how you'd structure that, whether it be an assessment area or something like that.
But to follow up on Kay's question, it's not as though you've estimated a total cost for the entire annexable area. And the developer who's proposed the first development in that area is not expected to pay the entirety of those improvements. Is it prorated?
Well, if you just merely said acreage, they're about a fourth of the acreage. So a fourth of that 7 million.
So that would be prorated.
And that may not be a fair way to do it, but just rough numbers.
The reason it wouldn't be is because the units are what really use the improvements.
How many units can you put? And then the 30% slope, you can't put any units. And
So
there's a
a
lot of
a number of
variables.
acres that aren't buildable, and so
Yeah.
you're not going to be using any of that.
Prorated on the number of units then?
Mr. Miller. Well, so the issue that we've got to think through is when you say proration, the question is up front or after, right? Because if it's up front, then that means the city's paying for the rest of it.
Either that or it's an assessment district that
Right.
which
So
would get
if it's after,
a lot
like
of negative.
Mr. Van Buren said, there have been cases in the past where developers have had to upfront the entire cost of new infrastructure, but with terms of the agreement and terms of the conditions of the deeds on the land saying that future development has to reimburse them based on their use of it.
Most of those have a limit, though, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's
In amount and time.
it's very common for
It's 10 years
to be
is
done right
what
at the end
our
of the 10 year.
limit is.
Right.
On the
Right
11th,
after-
on the
right
11th
after-
year,
yeah,
there's
right
a
after
lot
the
of development to go.
expiration. But the purpose of one of the purposes of the annexation agreement is to just make that clear up front what the expectations are, right? One of the things we want to avoid is annexing the property without any discussion of that issue, then the land being sold to a developer, and the developer then trying to say, well, we think that you have a statutory duty under state code to put it all in yourselves. So we're going to sue you if you don't put it in. So the purpose of the annexation agreement is to make it clear to everybody up front that this process is.
You described the sort of after scenario. There is a motive for the original developer to see that the remainder is developed.
Right.
Will they continue to use Rocky Mountain Power, or will that be
That would be switched over to
Provo City Power and same infrastructure, and it's just a matter of switching, or is that their cost involved in switching power?
Yeah, I'm not up on what those costs and that infrastructure would be.
That requires negotiation between the city and Rocky Mountain Power as to whether we're going to take over their assets or whether we have to install our own. And there are some complicated provisions in state code that I don't remember exactly how they work right now about how the prior energy provider can continue to provide power even though it's now inside the city. But doing that requires some extra steps, and we have to look into that. So what we probably need is, in the same way that Public Works has provided an estimate of what they think it costs, that energy probably needs to do the same.
Other questions for Dave or Ryan?
One thing I probably ought to mention, because the zoning is involved with that too. There were the recommended zoning, I think in your packet it shows the R110 on the lower area, which is basically the Tony Brown property. And then the RA on the remainder of the lower area kind of shows up there. See that? Here's the R110 on Tony Brown's property, RA on the Lower Smith properties, and then R11, 1 acre minimum on the upper properties. And that's the proposed zone. This is annexation area, I believe 6, that corresponds to that, and this is annexation area 5 on the general plan.
The shaded areas, the slopes.
Yes.
Shaded areas would exceed 30%, so that there will be some impact with that 30% on the layout.
Several lots seem inconsistent.
Yeah, this one's actually open space if you have the plat, so that's, even though it's zoned 1 acre, it's just
well,
not
I'm
just
looking
an
like that.
acreage.
On the upper part, I mean,
On the upper part,
Yeah,
if you go to the side, those two lots from the bottom. No.
Is it bottom?
Upper, right there. Those 3 lots, I mean,
Yeah, there's some in there that.
I don't even make it driveway access to those paths. We don't allow driveway access on above 30%.
We don't allow building above 30%.
I'm pretty sure we haven't done driveways on the past side.
These
are rough maps too, so it's.
Yeah, that's just a rough, just to
Okay.
get a general idea of we may encounter 30% areas. The developer, as they would come in, would do a more detailed study and provide us with more information. I just wanted to see how that looked on the information we had.
Okay. Well, this item will appear on our next council agenda on the 17th, weeks from today. So, Dave?
I might just mention with regard to the 30% slope, remember a couple of months ago, we updated our grading ordinance. And we have a process in place now where there can be a variance requested for doing, buildings and things in that 30% area. So where previously it felt like there was kind of an absolute, there is a process now where a request could be made there.
Yeah, as you can imagine, when the computer is analyzing and modeling this area, if it's 30.01%, it shades it. And so when you go up there and you look at the slope, you may look at it and say, that looks the same as that. Well, maybe it's 32%. It's 32% too much to build on. I don't know. That has to be a decision made by you. Whether to allow this sort of things.
Question, maybe this may be Brian's. If you talked about a special improvement district, are those also possibilities down the road for replacement and repair of that tank? Or would that become part of the whole city's obligation? Or could we special assess a certain area if we find that, oh boy, that's a tough area to maintain?
Such,
go ahead.
We would anticipate that would become part of the city's overall system.
And we could not necessarily special assess a certain area, even though it is part of the whole system, because if that was extra hard to maintain.
Could, but would, I don't know. You could create an assessment area anywhere in the city for different needs. But whether you do that or not is another question.
Mr. Garrett, can I make a comment on it?
Yes.
If this system was adopted and put into the regular water system, much like the other tanks, in fact, we're matching the Sherwood Fells tank and the Northeast tank, I would look at this very similar to the other tank, the other system that we already have in place. And it should be incorporated, the replacement cost should be incorporated into the user fees, and we should be saving money for the eventual replacement of those utilities, just like we're replacing any other system that's currently in the water system. That's typically how we would look at this.
All right, thank you again, Dave and Ryan. Appreciate your presentation. We look forward to discussing this issue again in 2 weeks. Thanks. Thank you to those who have come as well. Mayor Curtis, we turn to you for any items.
Oh, they're lengthy. Very briefly, a reminder that the State of the City is a week from today.
That's right.
10 o'clock at Newskin. Thank you for hosting. We'll be using their auditorium. What do you call the
Theater?
Theater. And if you're available, please join us. Look forward to that. We do have an executive session, and we have a brief matter to share with you there. And probably of most note is there's been another Provo company on Shark Tank, and who had a successful showing last Friday night. Phone soap is what they're called, and they're too bright, just like all these other bright people that you see. They've developed a little case, and if you put your phone in it, they use ultraviolet light to sanitize your phone and charge your phone. And they had 2 sharks vying for their product. It was fun. They came out and announced that it that they were Provo from Provo City, and we threw a little blog post up. Didn't really promote it or anything, and it's had thousands of views today.
We did nothing.
We can't quite figure out.
Somebody's got to be linking to it because we haven't done anything for it. So
I think that's all we have unless you have any questions.
Great. All right. A closed meeting has been requested, so I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Mayor, is it just one item?
Yes.
Okay. So my understanding is that there's been a closed session requested that has to do with some property that Provo City has a property interest in, and strategy regarding sale or disposition of that property interest, which is one of the approved purposes for a closed meeting under the
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'll entertain a motion then to close the meeting. Mr. Winterton, thank you, and a second by Mr. Van Buren. Those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you.
Reconvene here, or?
I know we gotta go to the other room, so. Signature. Thank you.
Can we give you a chance to-
Mayor.